Day 4 of the Great Lakes Planetarium Association Conference. I just put in the chat for everyone to see today's schedule, tomorrow's schedule, and the previous day's schedules too, if you're interested in going back and checking out some of the archived videos on our YouTube page. And then there's also our posters. So we have virtual posters. We have 5 of them up on the link or the site that I just linked to in the chat. But before I give you an introduction of that and show you what that looks like, if you're, not committed to clicking on that link just yet, before I show you a preview of that, check out our sponsors here on the shared screen. We just want to give a shout out to our wonderful 2020 GLPA sponsors, and you can see them all here. And we're going to be hearing from our sponsors today, and then we're also going to thank our sponsors again later during some of our breaks. Well, if you did go to that link there, you'll see that we have our virtual posters or videos, and they're basically like talks because each one I think is at least 8 minutes. And you have the abstract as well as the video right on that page, so you don't have to leave the page to see it. Including a presentation from our new planetarium show specialist at Ball State University. I was trying for years to get a staff position here, and we finally got one. And we have Rachel Williamson, who I'm sure some of you have seen in conferences over the summer and so on. And she's talking about here in her poster, aligning science standards to our virtual programs, because that's really helpful to teachers now when they have so much more on their plate than before. We also have a lot of student presentations, including one on mythology and the Milky Way, celebrating the stories of the sky. And you might remember or recognize who the collaborator here, the mentor here is, Dr. Sarah Schultz. And then Abby also submitted one. Some people might have seen Abby at the 2019 LIPS. Where she performed a little bit in the planetarium there. All right, I think I might just share just a little bit of one of these while we wait. Dale is up first with his presentation, Teaching Hybrid, and we've already done a test and everything, so I'm confident that Dale will be ready to go soon. So let's just hear a little bit of this poster here, and you can check out more of it later.
Hi, welcome to Mythology and the Milky Way, celebrating the stories of the sky. My name is Callie Tescher. I attend Minnesota State University in Moorhead, Minnesota. Currently, I'm a senior, and my major is Communication Arts and Literature Education. That is just a fancy way of saying English education. And I've been working at the MSUM Planetarium with Dr. Sarah Schultz for about 3 years now. During my time at the planetarium, I have done many different kinds of tasks. I've participated in event planning, show writing, creating shows, giving shows, many different aspects of planetarium. And I've been given a lot of freedom to do some fun things with shows. And I'd like to share with you guys some of the ideas I've had and how they have played out in our planetarium. Now, my initial idea for this presentation was that I found that a lot of people believed that the planetarium was only a place for science.
All right, so you're going to have to check out that on your own, but let's go ahead and get Dale ready to go. So let me stop sharing my screen, Dale, and I'll let you share yours. And whenever you're ready, Dale, you can just go ahead and begin.
Okay, I think we're sharing. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being up so beastly early. At least to me, this is beastly early as a night creature. At BGSU, the planetarium serves 2 very distinct roles. We're a theater for public and school shows, and we're also an astronomy classroom for a number of our, not all, but for a number of our BGSU astronomy classes. And I'm going to be focusing in this talk on how I'm using the planetarium as a classroom. In this COVID era, we at BGSU, like most of you, have some choice of the modes we run in. One mode we can run our classes in is hybrid, which is a mixture of face-to-face and online components. And then there's online classes, either synchronous or asynchronous. And if I can go to my next frame, I'm doing both of my classes as hybrid, meeting in the planetarium. The reason for going hybrid, part of it is I want the face-to-face contact. And part of it is I keep a crew of students who run Stargaze sessions in our observatory, and having face-to-face classes, is a recruiting mechanism for that. We seat 114 in the planetarium. We went into shock in the summer when we were told we could only put 21 people in there, and that later got raised to 21, thankfully, seats that are spaced out. Since I am in a high-risk group by age, I'm being pretty strict on safety mechanisms. I require masks of everybody in the dome. The city of BG also has a mask requirement, as does the university. We also require students coming to class and visitors to public shows to use a hand sanitizer that we provide. It smells like tequila, but it's a hand sanitizer. And also to use sanitizing wipes to wipe down the seats they're going to be sitting in. So we're being pretty careful on this, on the safety. In my classes, I have a rule in writing that if any one person appears without a mask, then the class session is terminated and everybody leaves the room for their safety. We have had excellent cooperation on that, and I've not had to enforce that, thankfully. So there's two classes I'm teaching in the dome. One is an honors introduction to the solar system. We have a limit of 12 in this class. Remember, the planetarium can seat 21 in COVID times. Even in a normal classroom under normal circumstances, we still have a very low limit. I want the students to be able to converse with each other and have discussions. We have a limit of 12. In this class, because we can seat everybody in the dome at once, is running very much like it would in normal times, except the students can't be close together, and discussion and collaboration in activities becomes tougher. The course works without me as the first provider of information. The students have daily assignments that are due every day except the first day of class, obviously, and exam days. So I've had students ask me if they have homework due on exam days, and I'm not quite that cruel. In normal times, students turn their work in by paper in class. Now they're emailing it to me before the beginning of the period they would normally turn it in on. And so it's in these daily assignments that are based on the text that the students get their first contact with the course's information. Most class sessions are discussions based on the assignment they turned in the previous period. If there's a question where everybody's done well, I'd go over that ever so briefly, and then spend more time on the questions that students had trouble with, especially if they had to do arithmetic, which of course they call math. And then I'll also in the class sessions sometimes make little mini lectures that extend the assignments. And I think this information has a better chance of sticking with them if they've already done the assignment than if I tried to deliver it before they've done the assignment. We also do some activities. For example, in the dome, a very common one that I like doing is having them see the sun's path across the sky in different seasons, rising and setting azimuth where it is at noontime, and then staying in June, going to different latitudes on the Earth. I like to have them make predictions ahead of time as to where the sun will be and what it will do, and then compare that with what they actually observe. And we also, though we don't have it in the notes here, students also do presentations that occupy some of the periods. My other class is a large lecture intro on stars in the universe. We normally, in normal times, limit this to the seating capacity of the planetarium of 114. But in COVID times, we're limiting it to 68, who, of course, I can't seat them all in the planetarium at once. So for dome time, have them divided into 4 groups by alphabetical order, A through F, G through M, and so forth. The course runs in a very different way from normal. There are no lectures. The PowerPoints I would use if I were lecturing are on the course's Canvas site. And I've preceded them by writing 1 or 2 or 3 pages of text, which summarize what the PowerPoint frames say and cover material that I would say if I were lecturing at them, or comments that extend what's on the PowerPoints. And I advise the students to print out the text and then study that concurrently with the PowerPoint frames. The other thing that's on Canvas are weekly quizzes, which I would be giving weekly quizzes in normal mode, but now they're posted on Canvas. There's multiple choice questions, 15 of them, most of them drawn from the PowerPoints, but some just enough drawn from the text. They have to read the text. I make it available for a generous amount of time, noon to midnight, roughly, since their schedules are going to be different from person to person. I want to give them plenty of time to take it. There is a 30-minute time limit once they start. The quizzes are open book. They can go out of the quiz into PowerPoint, look things up. And if they do that, well, that's a teaching moment. They'll probably learn that better than if they had known it coming in. We advise them that if they go out and look at a PowerPoint, that the 30-minute to take the quiz clock keeps running, so you don't spend a lot of time dawdling on the PowerPoint. The quiz grades are pretty good. They're actually up from the quiz grades a year ago when we were in normal mode. I think some of that is from things being open book, but it tells me that the learning process with PowerPoints and my not having to lecture actually is working. Normally, we get to see a given student for 150 minutes. The class meets Mondays and Wednesdays at 4:30 for 75 minutes, so 150 minutes. In this mode, I see them for 30 minutes a week, a lot less than normal, so there's much less face-to-face contact, and it's tougher to get to know the students. What we do in the 30-minute meetings are demos and activities of the sky, things that you really have to be in the planetarium to do. We show the sun's path here today, the sun activity I mentioned before, demos of the moon's motions, the planet's motions, both demos on the dome, and thanks to Gene Bishop's inspiration from years ago, doing modeling with globes to show the how come that these various motions occur. We also do some non-astronomy but physics activities, such as setting up discharge tubes with different gases so students can see the spectrum. And that really doesn't need the planetarium, but it needs a dark room, which the planetarium provides. In all of these activities and demos, even if the students get lost on a later explanation of how come things work this way, they still get to see the concrete results. And I think that's pretty important. Some days we're also running planetarium shows if they fit into the 30 minutes. The attendance at these sessions is holding pretty well. We're now in I think it's the 7th week of the semester. So either they think I'm doing a good job, or the material is interesting, or they're getting something out of it, or they want the face-to-face contact, or some combination of those things. And my last frame is part of the first couple of weeks of my course syllabus for this fall, just to show that how we're using the Monday and Wednesday times. Groups 1 and 2 meet on Monday for half an hour. Groups 3 and 4 meet on Wednesday for half an hour. So I'm doing the same demo, the same activity 4 times, which is bearable. If I had to do it more than 4 times, I don't know how I would manage it. There's a handful of times, a couple of weeks, where I'm having all 4 groups meet in a 75-minute period for 15 minutes each. And what we found is, though the logistics of all this sound confusing, it actually is working. I had a hall monitor there the very first day, August 26th, to guide people and get them used to the arrival procedures. The quizzes, as I mentioned, are online, and I'm showing a couple of them. Here I list a topic, or the topics the quiz covers, and then the PowerPoints on Canvas that the quiz is based on, and the units or chapters in the text that the quizzes draw from. My feeling 7 weeks in is the course is going reasonably well. The grades, like you said, the grades are pretty good, and people are still attending the 30-minute sessions. I'll make a few tweaks come spring, but basically I think this pattern for the hybrid learning is working. Students actually are learning something. And that's what I have to say. I'll be happy to, I'll stop screen sharing and I'll be happy to answer questions on chat. I guess, Dana, you can.
Yeah, I'll help you out with that, Dale. Thanks so much. Anne Bragg wants to know, how is 68 settled on when it isn't an integer multiple of the room capacity of 21?
Okay, when we're setting the limit, it's 4 times 17 is the short answer. We thought our limit was 17, and the course enrollment was going in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, 60s. I was panicking at that point. I said, I can't do things more than 4 times. If I have to go 5 or 6 times, I don't have enough class time to do that. So we got the limit set at 68. So 68 is 17 times 4. In the spring, I'm raising it to 72. But I still want a little buffer room, so if people come to a different group time, we can still seat them.
All right, and then Jane wants to know, why don't your honor students upload their assignments on Canvas instead of emailing you the assignments?
Just because I prefer to have them email it to me.
Yeah. So here at Ball State University, we have classes hosted in the Dome. They meet every single day in the Dome, and we have 3 astronomy and 2 geography. Do you have any other classes other than astronomy meet in the Dome?
We are this term because the Dome is under the control of our department, physics astronomy department, rather than the university. Mm-hmm. And so and even though it can only seat 21, there's other classes, for example, a graduate seminar that would meet in our conference room that can now hold 5 or 6 people. And so they can seat in the planetarium. They actually had a choice of, do they do it by Zoom or do they meet face-to-face? And they chose after a week to meet face-to-face. So they're meeting there. There's another astronomy class that's the lab-based course. That's got 30 people, so it needs a couple meetings to accommodate everyone. That's also meeting in the planetarium. So we're using it basically as a large classroom that we have access to and control the schedule of.
Yeah, with physical distancing, we're limited in our spaces here. And so I said, as long as the class aligns with the mission of the planetarium, which geography does, we would be happy to host them. In the future, do you think that you might have to or be asked to host other classes?
We might be. We would probably decline outside our department.
Okay.
Just so because in the department we have control over the use of the room, and I need access to it at times when classes are not.
And it's only made possible if you have like a staff person to manage it all. Yeah,
and I'm basically the staff person because my office is right next to the Dome. One of the things that's frustrating about the spaced seating, everybody wearing masks, I don't get to see faces so much, and it's taking longer to get to know, to know and to recognize them and to know people. And I don't know if that's frustrating to them. It is to me.
Yeah. It makes a big difference just knowing someone's name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dale. There's another question in the chat, but I'll let you follow up with anything else in the chat if you don't mind. We got to get moving on, though, to our next presenter. Thanks again, Dale.
You bet,
Sarah, you should be ready to go whenever you get your screen shared. Remember, if you have any audio or video, to optimize your audio and video when you share.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I got my pack of GLPA stuff from the exhibitors, and I was really excited to get it, so I miss you all, and I just want to say hi, everyone. But what I wanted to do today is share with you some of the access programs that we've been able to implement in the planetarium. And so let's go here. So the Whitney Elizabeth Planetarium, many of you already know, opened 2 years ago. It was brand new construction. And so I'll start with a kind of description of the space itself, is that we are a 16-meter dome tilted at 15 degrees. And then we have 120 seats here in kind of stadium-style seating. And then there's 2 sets of stairs running on the perimeter walls. And you can see the one across the way. Just in case any of you wondering, the lights across the way are red and they are capped. This was just a really early picture. So we didn't make those mistakes. It just our photographers that were getting wanted white lights everywhere to see everything. And then at the back here, we have our 2 exit doors that are actually in the rear of the planetarium on either side of the console. And so you actually enter at the rear, and then you could walk down those stairs to any of the 7 rows or down to that lower level presentation area. So that's kind of the physical setup of our planetarium space. So what we did is actually we decided to put our accessibility seating in the back, one, because then they don't have to worry about going down the stairs. But we have 5 wheelchair spaces in the back with 7 corresponding accessibility or companion seats. And what you see here in the image is we actually planned for a size inclusive double seat. So this double seat is actually just on wheels, and it can be brought out at a moment's notice for any visitor who has requested or would be more comfortable in it. But typically it's just stored just behind the dome, just outside one of the vestibules you see there. And by doing this, by putting the seats in the back, we've actually moved the accessibility seats, which are usually in not optimal locations in theaters or event spaces, but by putting them in the back row, they're actually now the best seats in the house. And so we've kind of flipped that norm of where accessibility seats are and the experience those who need them get to have in an event venue or a theater like ours. But of course, we still need that ramp. And so what we chose to do is we built the planetarium with a ramp behind the dome. And so this is where it goes from one of our entry vestibules, and it goes all the way down about 3/4 of the way around the dome. That last little quarter behind the scenes is in fact storage space. By doing this, we can use the lower level of the planetarium for special events. We use the ramp for equipment, moving it down to that storage space. This is often kind of where, when we host weddings in the planetarium, we'll have the officiant or sometimes the bridal party chooses to come out from the back of the dome, and kind of when we have our stage door in the lower front of it. But it also gives us an excuse, because people are back there, to keep the behind the scenes tidy. So we do take advantage of all of it as much as we can. We actually chose to go beyond what the ADA requires for our size theater. Our size theater would only require about 4 assisted listening devices. What we chose to do instead was go up to 26, and they're available all the time at the entrance to our planetarium. And then visitors could also pick them up from the front desk if they know upon entry of the museum they want them right away. And so we have them split between 2 locations. We also offer multiple headset options. So that middle image there, we have kind of 2 of the headband options, if you will, and one has just a single earpiece option. During COVID right now, what we've done is we've kind of swapped these reusable ones out and put kind of more cheaper, we'll say airline versions where we don't want the headsets back, but they're all individually packaged and visitors can grab them if they want to as well. And what we do is we offer, we have 2 channels that are dedicated on our system right now. The first channel that would be broadcast through the assisted listening device is just your English track of a film or your live microphone from your presenter. And so that way, if somebody needs this, they can just get that augmented volume and they can control their own volume on the device. That second channel is open right now, but that would be used for additional language tracks. And then what we learned earlier this year, right before COVID, is that with some of the way we've configured our soundboard, we actually have 4 additional open channels on our soundboard that could be used for additional audio should we want it to offer in more than 1 additional language for a show, or sometimes we have media in there that wants it out. So we have 4 additional languages that we have room to expand into different offerings for our assisted listening devices. But we also have offered audio described shows. Now, these are a little bit more involved than our just assisted listening devices. What we did in late 2018, early 2019 is actually work with a group from the Vision Loss Resources here in the Twin Cities. And we did a focus group for those who are blind or low vision. In this focus group, we had a pre and a post show. And in the pre-show, we'd use you can see down the bottom right, the tactiles. And so the audio describer they'd introduce themselves, and the planetarium staff would introduce ourselves. But then we'd also pass around in show order tactiles that went around with the show. So we gave them time to feel the objects and ask questions. and kind of gave an overview of what to expect in the show. And then the group was escorted to the planetarium. And for these focus groups, we did private showings. The audio describer then used this specialized mic here, so that way they were talking into it. And then the audio would go through our assisted listening devices that each of the VLR clients had. They also had volunteers with them to help them with anything they needed, whether it's navigating just a physical building. One of the clients actually even had a sight dog, and so they were in the planetarium with us as well. But then the presenter worked out ahead of time with the audio describer a signal system of just using a little red light that would say, okay, the audio describer would hold it up and click the button saying, hey, I need just a little bit more time to describe this. They also had mapped out ahead of time when to pause in the show and what the visuals were, so that way the audio describer could have the time they needed to communicate to the group. The audio describer before the group got there also saw the show multiple times, so they knew ahead of time what was going to happen visually, what the storyline was. They had the script ahead of time as well. Okay, and the things that came out of the focus group were that they asked for a microphone in the pre and post show in the classroom where we held it, because many of the clients were also hard of hearing, in addition to being blind or low vision. The clients also highly suggest having the assisted listening devices on lanyards, which ours are. Not all of them chose to put them around their neck, but that was a highly recommended thing, is to have that option and have the multiple options for ear sets. Some liked the headset option, some liked just the one ear, and our one ear pieces could swivel, and so they could choose if they wanted to go left or right ear. And so they said having that option was very beneficial. They could choose how they preferred to listen. Some of them even said that the laser pointer itself was distracting, that because of the way their sight has been impacted in many ways, the laser pointer across the dome would leave a red streak along their vision. And so they suggested using kind of the faces of a clock. Okay, look over to your right, left, look at noon, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, to kind of give them an idea of where they should generally turn and look, because not all of them were completely blind or can have no vision whatsoever. A lot of them had some sensory inputs. Sometimes it was just light they could see. Sometimes it was some detail, but they said the laser pointer in some cases was distracting. You could also use an icon, so if it was an arrow or a circle instead of using a red laser pointer, that could also address this concern they had. And then the audio scriber, even though they did come to multiple shows ahead of time, they did say that having a script with visuals would help them prepare before actually coming to the show. Like many planetariums, we do also offer American Sign Language and open captioning. On the left here, you can see our stage light with the red filter that shines from just behind the dome up top down to the bottom. So we have our ASL interpreter positioned down front. And then on the right here, you can see our LED cartboard. We do choose to go with live captioning instead of having the captioning from films or production companies go through our system. Part of this is that every show we do has some live component, and so we wanted to make sure we captured the entire show, not just the pre-recorded parts. And many of our shows, especially right now during COVID, are only live, so we're not showing any films at the moment. What we do with these two systems is that we schedule them on our schedule no matter what. And so about once a month, we'll rotate these two offerings through each of our shows. That way visitors who want to come and find these accommodations useful, they don't have to self-identify ahead of time. Any of our visitors can schedule, can buy tickets and then contact us and up to 2 weeks ahead of time saying, hey, I would really like to come to this show, but I do need an interpreter, whether it's for ASL, captioning, we've done audio described. We do need 2 weeks notice for those to work with the different companies and the different agencies to get the interpreter here. But these are two things we offer just on our shows on a regular basis. So those who do want them do not need to self-identify. We've also found that open captions help those who might not know that captioning helps them, or, for instance, English as a second language. So sometimes written English is easier to understand than spoken English for those visitors as well. So these are two things that are on our schedule on the regular that we offer. We also have sensory-friendly shows where we adjust a few of our normal proceedings. One, we've found that live shows are better for us in our theater because then we can more quickly adjust, where some films sometimes are faster paced, or sometimes they have fast changing visuals. So we go with our live shows for these sensory days, where we lower our mic volumes and we don't have background music playing. We have lower light levels upon entry, but also we maintain a low level of lighting throughout the entire show so we don't go completely dark. In the introduction, the presenter does outline what the show is going to happen that day, so that way we don't have any surprises for our visitors. We do reduced capacity, and we have relaxed shows. So that way, if they need to get up, or if a visitor needs to vocalize or anything, we also offer our 2 vestibules on either side of the console as kind of quiet spaces. So if they have to step out just for a moment, kind of recollect themselves and come back, they're welcome to do so. We do still note that if you leave that second door of the vestibule, those still close and lock behind you. So there's no re-entry if you completely leave the planetarium. But we do let them know the vestibules are available should they need just a moment to kind of recenter themselves for any reason.
Sarah, you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
We have a lot of questions if you want to have some.
Okay, let's go to questions then. Sorry, I didn't realize I was close on time.
So someone wants to know what vendor you used for the double seat.
You know what? I don't remember off the top of my head. We bought them when we bought all the rest of the seats. They match the rest of our seats.
Sure. Do you let people use their own headphones?
Our system doesn't accommodate that. So they, well, I guess headset, yes, if they wanted to plug it into our ADLs, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a procedure for handling anyone who might have an episode or a bad experience in the theater?
So we haven't come across anything like that. We do say if for some reason somebody has to leave within like the first 5 minutes, just go check the front desk and then they'll get a refund. But we haven't had any big, huge kind of episodes. So that's something luckily we haven't come across.
Yeah, great. And then can you explain the process and costs involved with scheduling ASL interpreters and how the live captioning works?
Yep. So I'm going to skip to my end slide here because of what things you could do while I answer that. We are part of the University of Minnesota, so they do have disability services that we could request, including interpreters. Many times during the semester, they are busy with on-campus students, and so we go to outside agencies. Now, ASL and captioning, those run about between $150 and $250 per show, so those can be a little bit more expensive. The audio described shows a bit more because those involved more and more practice time for those services. But there's a lot that you can do, especially if you're part of a larger organization. They might have resources you can already utilize that you might not have looked into before.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. A lot of great comments in the chat, and there's some more questions there too. So I'll let you follow up there, but thanks, Sarah.
Will do. Thank you.
And then up next, we're going to hear from our sponsor, Ash Enterprises. So John, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen. If you have any video, make sure to optimize your audio and video when you share. And you have 10 seconds until your start time. But I'm sure by the time you get this slideshow going, you'll be good to go. Thanks, John. I'll unmute you for you.
Oh,
there you go.
Thanks. Well, greetings. I first wanted to thank GLPA, the conference committee, for making this, a virtual conference possible. And I think it's really been successful so far. My name is John Albert, and I'm the marketing director of Ash Enterprises. Here to give you a real brief overview of Ash. Many of you know the Ash team, and let's see if I can back up here. But the Ash team is certainly been around for a while. The company began in 1971, and they've installed, service, and maintained hundreds of planetariums since then. Many of you are familiar with each one of our employees. So really proud to be part of a enterprise and company that's been around in the planetarium community for such a long time. The company still maintains nearly 100 optical mechanical planetarium projectors around the country, primarily Spitz and Godo instruments. These have been critical in providing maintenance for primary schools and universities. And many of which these planetariums would probably no longer be in operation without ASH. So ASH has really been instrumental in helping a number of planetariums continue operation, and in some cases actually be in operation until they can raise funds to upgrade equipment. So most of these earlier instruments are Spitz, again, Minolta, Godo, optomechanical instruments. But over the years, ASH has developed a number of partnerships in the planetarium community, including full dome systems. RSA Cosmos, in particular, is a full dome video astronomical simulation software company. We also continue to maintain Godo instruments and also have hybrid systems with Godo and RSA Cosmos. A mere dome system is called Warp Media for smaller theaters, even portable theaters. And Prismatic Magic is a laser company that we also partner with. We do their sales and rentals for planetariums and museums. They offer a large library of educational and entertainment programs. Again, SkyExplorer is the astronomy simulation software for our RSA Cosmos. And they have over 400 some planetariums throughout the world. So if you'd like to have more information about SkyExplorer, I'll be more than happy to share that with you. ASH has always believed in diversity. And the theater design, of course, is so much more than a projection system. And ASH has, over the years, become partners with, for example, Chroma Cove, first class seating. We have the Astrotech manufacturing domes. We provide elevators and lifts for many of the Spitz earlier instruments, sound, complete sound, instrument engineering of sound equipment, and of course, full dome content and visualization. I believe that's Eric Mellenbrick way up there, about to paint a dome. So ASH continues to clean and paint domes. So again, we do a lot of planetarium related projects and cover everything from beginning to end of a new planetarium system. And for many that have an older Spitz projector, incandescent light source, we offer LED light sources to make your stars twinkle again if you wanted to refresh your star field. So the company has been around for a long time, and I consider that a long time in the planetarium business. John Hare is the CEO of ASH Enterprises, and he began the company in 1971. And next year, 2021, is our 50th anniversary. It seems like there are several major anniversaries, Silicon Planetarium in Adler maybe a few others that are coming up or are occurring. But
John, I'm sorry, you have about 10 seconds left.
Okay, we just moved into new digs here. This is about 5,000 square feet. And so we're really happy to have a new home here in Richmond, Virginia. And this will be our new headquarters operation and warehouse. And I really appreciate all of your attention. Thank you. And our contact information is on our website. So again, thank you all.
Thank you, John. And thanks, Ash, for sponsoring GLPA 2020. All right, next up is Raymond with addition of computational activities to a general education astronomy course.
All right.
And again, if you have any audio or video, make sure to optimize your things before you share.
Certainly. Good morning, and I'm reporting on adding computational activities to a general education astronomy course and some very preliminary results of what we got. This is an extension of a previous course transformation from lecture to active learning components. And that was done because I had recently entered the field of physics education research and started a degree program and wanted to implement what I had learned about active learning techniques. I also started working with the Partnership for Integration of Computation into Undergraduate Physics and liked some of the things that they were doing. The course itself was originally lecture-based, sophomore level, single semester general education astronomy course. It was based on algebra and had a low-level physics course as a prerequisite. There was no laboratory or recitation component included, and our typical class size was 25 students. Now, the active learning that I spoke of are instructional methods that engage students in the learning process where they have to participate, requires students to do meaningful learning activities and to think about what they're doing. There's also a strong social or collaborative component to the learning process. The computation that I'm talking about is not particularly using calculators, but these are exercises where students are actually coding the calculations. They're integrating concepts and using formulas to produce solutions, and this reinforces the learning through the student production of concept-based results. Because so much of today's society is about numbers and calculations, this is also a little bit of a preparation for them to go there. The computational tools that we have available are spreadsheets, graphs, Python or VPython, Java, Mathematica, MATLAB, and some more traditional programming languages like Fortran or C. Now, why did I choose to add active learning or computation? Well, first of all, it is an active learning technique, and having to code the formula means that the students have to consider what the formula mean, and this requires applying the concepts in a material way, which deepens understanding and builds critical thinking skills for the students. Now, it also, there is a large population of pre-service science teachers, about 50% in the course, and this is an opportunity to demonstrate active learning and research-based teaching methods to the pre-service teachers. The content of the course was the same as the original lecture-based astronomy course. Active learning replaced half of the lecture in that course, and what I did was add computational exercises that were keyed to the active learning tasks the students were doing. There's still a large collaborative or group work component, and the class was entirely online this semester, and so the group work was done in Zoom breakout rooms. Some of the computational activities that I added were early solar system temperature distribution, light, telescope calculations, planetary relationships, Kepler's laws, black body radiation, and planetary climates and energy budget. Now, for this course, I chose to use spreadsheets, and the students would code the formula into the cells. I provided the students with templates with some of the material already in the template for the students. And then the students went to their breakout rooms and worked collaboratively to name the cells, figure out what the formula should be, and enter the formulas. Formatting for the spreadsheets was a low priority as far as the final product. Examples of this were, for Kepler's law, I had them do a spreadsheet where they input the distance from the sun in meters and got the length of the planetary year in seconds, and also the inverse, which was to input the length of the planetary year in seconds and get the output distance from the sun in meters. Now, in doing this, if you look on the left, one of the cells is named distance as opposed to A1, A2, or A3. And this was done so that when the students were coding the formulas, they would wind up with something that was reminiscent of what they were looking at in the text or the formulas they were looking at on paper. So for the period, they would have the square root of the Kepler's law constant K multiplied by the distance cubed. There was a second activity where they were looking at the temperature in the early solar system formation. I had them graph that, and one of the resources that they had a graph which was a straight line, and I showed them where that came from. It was essentially a log-log graph that they were doing. As far as the planetary climate and heat balance, in this one, we started looking at the luminosity of the sun, the insolation of the sun at the distance of the outer planets, what the planets were absorbing, and then based on their temperature, what they were radiating, and the difference between the two. In this one, for example, to get the insolation, the formula is on the right there. The luminosity of the sun was divided by the surface area of a sphere with the radius at the planetary distance. And what the planet was radiating in terms of power was the radiation, the power per square meter, Stefan Boltzmann law, which was sigma t to the fourth, times the area of the planetary disk. And these were the things that the students were coming up with and coding in the spreadsheet. Now, the difficulties and drawbacks of this are that it takes more time and more effort to do than a standard lecture course. There is increased preparation and presentation time for the lessons. The planning is time-consuming and complicated. One of the things that I had to do was I had to create or write all of the exercises because there were no ready-made computational exercises available for astronomy. Also, students would occasionally have difficulty with the mathematics or with coding the formulas in the spreadsheet. And there were also differences in functionality between the online spreadsheets and spreadsheets which were natively resident on computers. Now, to assess what was going on, we gave pre-tests at the start of the semester, and after the final, we will give post-tests. These are preliminary results. Test of astronomy standards, a concept inventory of general astronomy knowledge was given, along with the lunar phases concept inventory. And the initial results for TOAST, the correctness rate was 52%. For the LPCI, the correctness rate was 42%. And then after the end of the semester, these will be paired with the post-test results to see what gains, hopefully gains, we got from our technique. Also gave a 12-question survey of the students, again preliminary, asking about what they thought were the easy and difficult parts of the course, whether they liked the computational exercises or what difficulties they had with them, whether they appreciated the group work, and their general attitudes and preferences about the course. And the results of that assessment are that 80% liked or appreciated the computational exercises, and 80% expressed approval for working in groups. 60% made some kind of statement about the math or the formula being hard, and 60% of the students said that they might be able to apply the spreadsheet skills they learned somewhere else. Some of the student quotes on this were that the computational exercises helped them to understand how the formulas work and made it easier to understand the concepts and to do calculations. There were comments about the group work helping them to figure out answers. And there were comments on, I get confused on how to use it, which refers to actually entering the formulas in the spreadsheet. And either I or the rest of the group would help them with that. The conclusions here are that students like the computational exercises overall. Students requested more background and explanation to do the spreadsheets. Originally, we started with just blank spreadsheets and switched to providing them with a template where some of the initial material was already on the spreadsheets, and this increased student confidence and reduced confusion, and that the students appreciated the group work. I would like to thank Rebecca Lindell of Tilly-Adal STEM Education Solutions for help with the original planning for the course and providing some of the course materials we used, and Rebecca Rosenblatt for also helping to organize the course initially and providing suggestions and counsel. Thank you. If you have questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Raymond. We do have a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to start with a couple of mine, though. In your tests, in your like pre and post tests, the post test, you said about 80% liked working in groups. Do you have any question that kind of just speaks to the general interest in the subject matter in general?
I did not ask them whether whether that was about the subject matter or just whether they liked the idea of being able to help each other in the groups.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, I think, to know if they're more interested in it afterwards, after doing that group thing. What are your thoughts on that with recruitment and retention efforts? Do you think that having that social component really helps with those things?
Both in this course and in previous courses where we weren't doing computation, but we were doing group work, the students have expressed a lot of appreciation for the group work and said that it made the course better. In a previous session of the course, one of the students, or two of the students actually, said that it made them less apprehensive about the course and look forward to coming to class.
That's great to hear. Do you have to teach them Excel basics first?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they don't come with knowing how to use formula, naming cells, and things like that in Excel. So one of the initial activities was Bode's Law, which I used to show them, okay, look, here's coincidence. And at the same time, it got them started in making calculations and entering formula and actually doing, we did a graph of the Bode's Law result versus what the real distances of the planets were.
Okay.
So that was teach them.
Yeah, I have a few more questions, but one just popped up in the chat. How do you handle students who just prefer to work alone?
The students have been, I haven't had to. The students have been cooperative. Some of them have expressed a preference for learning alone, but students who wander off either in real life or virtually hasn't really been a problem for the class. So.
Great. All right. So one last question. We only have about 10 seconds. Are you declaring intellectual property on your exercises, or are you releasing them? Basically, we really want them. Like 4 people at least said they want them, that you've worked really hard on.
They are not intellectual property. I will be publishing them. I have no problem in giving them away either. I will be publishing them in a couple different ways, but they are not specifically intellectual property. So.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing those. Thanks so much, Raymond.
You're welcome.
And next up, we have Shannon Schmull, creating inclusive exhibits with undergraduate students. Shannon, whenever you're ready. I can.
The bar to unmute myself wouldn't come down. So
yeah, it's there.
All right.
And I know you usually like to do closed captions, so if you wanted to do
Yes.
that.
Oh, thank you for reminding me.
All right.
There we go. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am going to be talking about another collaboration that we have done at Abrams Planetarium. So if you saw my talk earlier on Monday, that was one collaboration that we did with the Wharton Center. But this is a collaboration we did with a professor in our Lyman Briggs Residential College, which is our STEM residential college. So it's a space where all the students live there and eat and have classes, and all their professors' offices are there as well. So it's a big community-based college. We have them as well for business and arts and humanities and so on our campus. So the way that I generally start a lot of collaborations is I meet somebody at a meeting and I invite them out to the planetarium just to see what we can do. And we start brainstorming, and we can usually end up with some really exciting projects this way. This one started a bit differently. So Professor Georgina Montgomery, who is a professor at Lyman Briggs, she's a science historian. She had brought her kids to a planetarium show one weekend just for a fun family activity, and then emailed me afterward and said, hey, it was a lot of fun, but I noticed that you didn't have a lot of women or people of color represented in your planetarium lobby space, especially. And my initial reaction, my gut reaction was, oh no, she's being critical of me. But I very quickly got over that and was like, I agree with her. And this is something that I want to change. And she wanted to work with me and her students in order to try to do that, to create more exhibits within the lobby that would be more representative of more diverse people within science. And so she teaches a class. It's called the History, Philosophy, and Sociology of STEM, and it specifically focuses on race and gender within science. It's a 4-credit freshman class. And the way that it traditionally is taught is there's a lot of readings, there's videos, and there's discussion in the course. And so the way that it changed for this, it included those things as well, but it also created this sort of authentic learning project that lasted the entire semester. And it's a project that specifically gave students ownership over what they were doing in a way that was important for sharing with the community. So I acted as a client for the students. We brought them to the planetarium about, I think, the second day of class, maybe the third. And we talked to them about the space and how we'd like it to be more inclusive in general. And we showed them the planetarium. We talked a little bit about how we can make astronomy more inclusive, what that means, that what we generally talk about with our 88 constellations is very Western European centric, and how we can expand that viewpoint to allow more voices to be heard. So then the students went back in groups of about 4 to 5, and they had to create a project idea. They pitched it to us. They had to give us a budget, and then they had to create a final product at the end, with the idea that if it was complete and it hit those things that we were asking for, it would actually be put on display in the planetarium. And we ran this class twice this way with the planetarium as a client. The first time we gave the class a total budget. The whole class got $500 to spend collectively on the exhibits, which isn't a whole lot of money, but it resulted in some really amazing things. And we actually pitched in a few extra dollars here and there when we felt it was something that was worth it to us, essentially. So this was ultimately a win for everybody. So it was great for Professor Montgomery because she was able to have a more innovative class and show her deans a new way of teaching within Lyman Briggs. We got some really amazing exhibits out of it. And for the students, it was also great because they had, again, this ownership over the exhibits. But also what we noticed, we did a study with the second class. A graduate student came in and did a study around how this impacted the students' own identity, self-identity as scientists, and what that meant compared to a control class. So the purple there represents the control, whereas green shows changes for the group that the class that we had with where I was a client. And we saw that especially students found that their ethnic and gender identities were an important part of them being a scientist, which was not something we saw in in the control group. And we saw more of them saying things like, I see myself as a scientist and I am a scientist. This full study is going to be available shortly. I just paid the publication fees, and so it will be in the International Journal for STEM Education. And so if you are interested in that, let me know, and I'd be happy to help you see that study. So ultimately, also with these exhibits, it allowed us to have student voices in the planetarium. One of my goals with the planetarium for sure is to not just only be a teaching space for astronomy, but to be a teaching space for science communication as well for our university students. So for the first semester, we ended up with 5 different new exhibits in our lobby, and you can see that transformation here. For anyone who was at GLPA in 2018 here at the Abrams, you might have seen a lot of these. I know a lot of you took some pictures with this first one, which was a stand-in with Mae Jemison. So this allows people to see themselves as an astronaut. I mean, it's a fun thing that you see all over the place, but it also serves the purpose of someone imagining themselves as an astronaut and getting to hang out with Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space. And they included a brochure that you could take home that included more information about Dr. Jemison, as well as activities that kids could do when they got home. We had another one. This is right outside my office. It's like right there, around Ojibwe constellations. So the Ojibwe are part of the Anishinaabe people, and we are on Anishinaabe land at MSU. So this is an important thing to acknowledge and recognize. And so the students created this. It's a felt board, basically. So this down here on the bottom, that's felt. We put it down low so kids could access it. And then these are stickers that have felt on the back. So you can stick them. And there are these clues over here where you could learn about the constellations and where they are. And then you try to figure out where on the sky to place them. And they did consult with the Native Skywatchers program, as well as Beth LaPonce, who's faculty here. She's Anishinaabe faculty in our Communication Arts and Sciences. And so she did the art here that you see. And Beth and I are actually thinking about trying to make this out of more robust material, because $500 can only get you so far. And this is a very well-loved exhibit. And we are realizing that with a lot of our exhibits right now. Another group chose to do a touch screen that explored ancient astronomy. It included Mayan, Polynesian, Egyptian, Arabic, and Chinese astronomy, and explored sort of very ancient astronomy and what that sort of set us up for in terms of our modern understanding. We also have that giant Earth, which has a tiny little button that you push and makes it go, and that was all that was around there. And so students decided to fill that space in with talking about modern as well as cultural astronomy around the Earth from around the world, focusing on different regions. And they also made this little Sparty astronaut. Sparty's our mascot here. So. And then another group decided to make this timeline that goes along this big, long, curved wall that we have in our lobby. And it featured a lot of people of color and women scientists from antiquity to today. And at the end has a question of, how do you see yourself contributing to science? So again, asking the audience to reflect on how they can be a participant as well. And why were these people important to science? And then we gave sticky notes. There's Post-it notes and pens so that people can answer that. So you can see it got very filled up here. We have to cull it every few months because we run out of room. Sometimes they end up on the ceiling. Sometimes there's inappropriate things, especially if we run a Pink Floyd show. So we have to go take that out. But for the most part, we get some really amazing answers on there. We get a lot of drawings. We get a lot of, it's a really nice way for us to get feedback on how people are responding. The second semester, we put in some funding as well, but Lyman Briggs was not able to. And so instead they offered a maker space. But ultimately what we found was a lot of the exhibits needed a lot more extra work to make them exhibit ready. But there's a lot of really fantastic ideas that came out of it. So this is one that I can share. We would print these up. They have all these facts about what it takes to be to go into space and what you have to think about for packing, and ask people to grab a flashlight to go through our blacklight gallery. And so the idea is these facts would be up in between our blacklight paintings, and you use a flashlight to find them. So you are an astronaut exploring space, essentially. So it's kind of getting people to again, participate in that exploration and discovery. And then there was a worksheet at the end. Another one is a touch screen that we need to clean up a whole lot in terms of how it looks, but it was fantastic in that it basically asked the audience member to pick a scientist, and then you interview them. So you pick on the touch screen a question to ask them, and then there's audio clips from previous interviews where they answer those questions. And they even got like a little phone that would hook up with the audio jack so that you could listen to it on the phone without it blasting out to the entire lobby, which was, I think, a fantastic idea. And so those are a couple of them. We haven't put any of these up yet, largely because they are going to take a lot more work for us to get them exhibit ready. But the ideas that were coming out from the students are really great. And it gives us a chance to not just have our ideas be the ones that are always out there, but we give a space for others to share what's important to them. So, all right. I will open it up to questions. And
go ahead.
That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Shannon. How did the students get involved with this?
So it was part of a class. So it was a class that they signed up for, and I don't think they necessarily knew what they were getting into at the time until they signed up for it. So this is built into the class itself. So it was a matter of signing up for this freshman course, basically.
And what's the course?
I don't know. It's the history, sociology, or history, philosophy, and sociology of science within our Lyman Briggs College. That said, I have worked on somewhat similar projects with an integrated arts and humanities course that we have here, where we actually involve high school students in Lansing to also think about exhibits. That hasn't been structured in a way that we have ended up with exhibits, but it is a similar kind of structure in terms of collaboration, bringing students here, talking to them, and so on.
Great. So if someone has a small lobby or not really any lobby at all, what do you suggest they do with that space?
So I think a really impactful thing that you could do that doesn't take up a lot of space is something like a touch screen. So the ones that we have are all-in-one touchscreen computers that we run Worldwide Telescope on. And so we've built out Worldwide Telescope kiosks, basically. So both of the student touchscreen projects have been that. And what's nice about that is those were the ones that were no cost as well, aside from getting the touchscreen. And then you can easily swap out the content that you use. And we have a lot of these Worldwide Telescope touchscreen things now. So if anyone is interested in them, I have at least a few of them available on a Google Drive, and I can share that with you.
Great. Susan wants to know, does the timeline also include the men that we all know, so people can get the full picture and associate the time period where women and others were also doing science?
Absolutely. So that was an important part of that as well, is we wanted to make sure that we included everybody, and that does include white men as well as people of color and women. And so it also includes scientists with disabilities. So that's something I should point out in terms of what we mean by inclusion here. And so it added in a lot of the folks that we don't get represented as often.
Yeah. Does it mention the disability or anything? Or is that information that they'll have to look up?
I'm trying to think because it's a very long timeline. I think it does.
Okay, great. Well, if there's any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, everyone, and Shannon will be happy to answer them there. But we're going to get moved on to our next sponsor presentation. Thanks so much, Shannon.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Spitz presenting. And you got about 10 seconds till your start time, not total. Whenever you're ready. I'll go ahead and unmute you. Or you got it. Okay, never mind.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike McConville, Director of Marketing and Customer Outreach for Spitz and Evanston Sutherland. And we've had a fortunate year. Even though Spitz was closed for 11 weeks because of COVID, we've still been able to take care of quite a number of our deliveries. We have about a dozen active Spitz Planetarium projects currently out there. And it's been a year of collaboration for us. And one of those collaborations with our partner, Evanston Sutherland, love to introduce you to Estelle Pacalon to talk a little bit about show distribution in the next coming years.
Yes, hi everybody. So my name is Estelle and I'm here to explain you 3 good reasons why to contact us when you are looking for a show. So first of all, we have direct relationships with full dome and giant screen producers to be sure that all the latest content is included in our catalog. Second, all our marketing team is here for you to help you to promote your content with your general public, with educational guides to be sent to the schools, with social media posts. And third, for all our customers, encoding and slicing fees are free for you. And for everybody else, all the content is tested to be ready to play on your dorm. So feel free to contact us. Here are my colleagues, Mike and Jen, whoever you want. And now, please enjoy the trailer of Mars 1001 and Birth of Planet Earth, our last production. Thank you.
In the fiery beginnings of our young solar system, gas giants stare chaos. Worlds are born and obliterated. How did Earth survive against all odds?
When we finally commenced on that bold interplanetary journey, it was the grandest mission of exploration ever undertaken and the highlight of my career. My only wish is that we could go back to that time and place, and this time I would live a little more in the moment rather than being so darn busy reporting on it.
From the day that we were born, we were destined to be together in this room today. We are attempting to expand the horizon of humanity.
Houston, go ahead.
And take a profound step in the evolution of the human race. No journey in history was more hazardous or more difficult to accomplish.
Hey, Daisy.
Oh, hi, Robert.
The hydroponics growth looks amazing.
It's great, isn't it? 0.38 G is so much better than 0G. The plants just love it.
Iris 1, you see your turn to entry attitude. You're go for EDL. Guidance recommendation, you're clear to land.
Watch for the dust. Slow down the descent rate. You've got it made.
James, did your mom promise to bring you anything back from Mars?
It would be nice if she could bring me a stone.
That would be very nice. Do you have any worries?
Well, I hope a spaceship is gonna work well with the engine, you know, because it's a long way to Mars, and I hope it would be really nice if she could come home again.
2020 has also been a very good year for both Spitz and Evans and Sutherland with our professional development events. In July, we held Spitz Institute over 5 days, had 65 attendees, and produced 80 hours of online content in 3 concurrent sessions. Just last month, the Digistar Users Group set a record with 150 attendees for online workshops, for user demos, and of course, bringing the Digistar user community together. But of course, one of the reasons you know Spitz is that we are the world's leader in projection domes. In our nearly 80-year history, we've installed more than 2,000 of them around the world. And really, the dome is the most important part of your facility. It is the part of your dome, the part of your planetarium that everyone sees at all times. Doesn't matter what sort of projection system you use. And that's why we think that if your screen isn't the best, what you're showing on it can't be its best either. We've set that benchmark for projection domes because of our technology, whether it is our epoxy-based powder coating, it's our frame design, or our nanoseam panel fabrication and installation techniques that gives you the best dome in the world today. Nanoseam has been chosen by more than 250 sites around the world, planetariums, science centers, theaters, attractions, because you're looking for the most uniform, most perfect projection surface possible. And above all else, it's our dedication to surface and to detail that makes us the choice for so many customers around the world. Just since GLPA last year, we've had nearly 30 different orders and installations take part, both domestically and internationally. A few to point out: a custom screen for the centerpiece of the UAE Expo 2020, known as the Pearl, and then of course finishing out major products in Shanghai, in the United States, and in the United Kingdom. One of the things you might notice about this list is there are a number of repanels on there, and Spitz is the industry leader when it comes to repaneling domes of all backgrounds. It is easy for us to take existing screen structures, repanel them with nanoseam technology, and have a transformative aspect to your dome with very minimal infrastructure changes.
Michael, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Dana. But of course, the greatest collaboration between Spitz and Evans and Sutherland has been DomeX. We introduced DomeX LED systems last year because we believe that this is the future of immersive dome experience. This is the best image quality you can imagine in a planetarium. Extreme contrast, brightness, and resolution native to this technology. But the surface of the dome is what makes it great. This is matte, flat black. We've been working for 3 decades in full dome technology to get back to black skies that DomeX allows us to have. No washed out colors, the best contrast you could ask for, and no cross reflections from projection, what we would see in all sorts of projection systems around the world. Because DomeX is emitting rather than reflecting the light, we can do new sight lines. We can build more immersive planetarium domes. All the panels are perforated for air and for audio transmission. And of course, one of the big standout features is the Spitz designed support system. That maintains the tolerances that you need for uniform illumination and display. But one of the big questions of the past year has been when? When do we get to see this? And for the more skeptical amongst you, is this capability real at all? Well, as you can see, DomeX isn't just real, it is spectacular. And so what we'd like to do is invite all of you to come and visit the new Experience Center opening later this year in Salt Lake City at the Evans and Sutherland headquarters. We want you to experience the dome, experience the LED technology we've put throughout the Experience Center, and see the future of planetarium tech. So if you're interested, visit us at es.com/domex, and we'll send you an invitation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Spitz, for sponsoring GLPA 2020. And thank you to all of our sponsors, actually. We cannot do this without you, so thank you. And while we go into our break, just a reminder that we do have our virtual posters. And I'll put another link to that in the chat with some nice star patterns there so people can definitely see it. But just a sneak peek, if you're not familiar with it, it leads you to the virtual poster session page on the GLPA website, where 5 different posters, each one at least 8 minutes long, is available. So we're going into a 25-minute break. So if you want to put on one of those videos while you have lunch or anything else, please do. And of course, we'll leave the room open. You're welcome to unmute yourself and chat, have dialogue in the chat as well.
Shannon, if you want to go ahead, you're more than welcome to go ahead and start.
All right, should we get started or wait for another minute or so for everyone to get back?
We could probably wait a minute if you'd like. Do you want me to give you a 2-minute warning when you're getting close to time, or what would you like?
I think I'll be okay. I'll be keeping an eye on the clock.
Okay, great.
If I'm like at like 30 seconds or something,
yeah,
you go ahead and be like, stop.
Well, I'll be nicer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we all ready for an astronomy update? Yeah, all right. So I do have 2 screens up because I still want to see your lovely faces when I'm talking. So if I look like I'm looking away, it's because I want to see you. Part of talking and presenting, as we all know, is interacting with our audience. All right. Right. Should we get going? All right, I'm seeing some. All right, fantastic. All right, we'll go ahead and get started so that we do stay on time and everything. I have practiced this. It doesn't go quite 45 minutes, but welcome to Astronomy Update 2020. I'm excited to be back and share with you some astronomy stories. And the way that I did this in the past 2 years was I just collected a bunch of stories as I go along and kind of keep a running list of them. And then in the summer, sometime I start going through them, start digging a little deeper to see what sorts of stories I feel like I can maybe add to. So beyond what we can all read at space.com or Sky and Telescope and so on. So there's a lot that end up on the cutting room floor, but here is sort of a rapid fire update of some of, I think, the more important stories. Maybe. There we go. So here are some of the some big ones and important ones that I think. One is that the Yerkes telescope was originally owned by the University of Chicago, and they decided to give up ownership due to the cost and to focus on other projects. And so a group of citizens came together and formed the Yerkes Future Foundation, and they are working to get it up and running and open to the public again and to preserve it. And so it's getting sort of a new lease on life, which I think is quite exciting. We also lost astronaut Al Worden. He was 88, and he was the command module pilot for Apollo 15. We learned that Titan is moving away from Saturn 100 times faster than we originally thought. So I think it's about 4 inches a year now, which is quite significant. So it's a speedy little moon there. Not little, it's quite big. This Parker Solar Probe has been orbiting around the sun and getting some great images, getting quite close to the sun. But of course, the European Space Agency did not want to be outdid. And so they, with their solar orbiter, managed to get the closest images of the sun ever. So we've got some really nice pictures of the sun. The next is probably my absolute favorite, cookies in space. So for those of you who know me or are Facebook friends with me, know that I bake a lot. So this is why this is my absolute favorite, because they baked on the International Space Station. which is really cool. They had to like design this like special little envelope and oven so that it would actually like stay and not float away and bake. And it took like 2 hours, but it's still cool. I mean, awesome. They couldn't eat it, but one day they will. Also, there was a really cool black hole. There's a lot of black hole stuff this year. It might be my bias in that I like black holes, but there was an active galactic nuclei, so a feeding black hole that turned off and then on again, which was really weird. It seems that a large, it bit off more than it can chew, so it probably consumed a star that was a little bit too big, and that kind of just stopped it, and then it reformed its accretion disk pretty quickly. Also, we found some of the largest black holes in a merger, not the largest black holes ever, but there was 150 solar mass black hole merger. That was the end mass that was found with gravitational waves. Dave asked, why can't they eat the cookies? They need to test it to make sure nothing weird happened beforehand. They had to do this with the space lettuce too, which now they can eat up in space. But this gravitational wave ended up with 150 solar mass black hole. Sort of the peak of a stellar mass black hole is about 25 solar masses. And this one was 150. So the two objects together had to be more than that. So this is showing us that intermediate mass black holes are out there. We found stellar mass black holes. We found super massive massive black holes, but nothing really in between. So this is, but we've expected them. So this is a pretty exciting result. And of course, Roger Penrose, Reinhard Gensler, and Andrea Ghez all won Nobel Prizes for their work around black holes and general relativity around black holes, and specifically the black hole in the center of our galaxy. Andrea Ghez is someone who I've been following since I was an undergraduate. I'm a big fan of her, so I was really excited to see that she won this award for her work with that supermassive black hole in the middle of the Milky Way. So go. All right. Also, I feel like we would be remiss to not talk about this one. There's life on Venus, right? Totally, right? No. How many of you had to do like a media interview for this? Raise your hand. And no, some people I think did. Or if we posted it, we're going to have to definitely, we had to be a little more careful because these were the news stories. Why does it point to extraterrestrial life on Venus? Or there's a potential game changer. They at least had, some tentativeness in it. We might have found it 40 years ago. Oh, aliens were on Venus the whole time. That's my favorite. Yeah, no, it wasn't. Possible signs of life. Again, there's some tentativeness there. And then, of course, there's the ones that are like, no, guys, we did not find life on Venus. So I think what this one does is it was a really cool result. It's a really interesting result that results in a lot of new questions, which is exactly what science should be doing. When we get a result, it should result in new questions so that we can figure out more. And so I think it's a really exciting result, and it will take us in new directions when we're studying Venus. But it's our jobs as science educators to be like, hey, now, this isn't what that's saying. There's more to this story, and let's say that. Which takes me, I think, to probably the biggest science story of the year, which is the coronavirus. I did look up where coronavirus name came from, and there is one version of the story is that it looked like a coronal mass ejection. So that's the extent of the, so that's the coronavirus under an electron microscope, by the way. So that's the extent of the astronomical connection there in terms of the science. But what I think is important to take away from this, and this also comes out of the Venus story as well, is that with the coronavirus, what we're seeing is science happening in real time, right before our eyes. And normally when science gets shared with the public, it's the end result. It was this paper came out and this is what the paper said, and not necessarily that process of always trying to find the clearer answer, because science isn't necessarily trying to find the answer. It is trying to find the best answer we can with the current evidence. It's one of the best tools we have for getting that, but it's sort of like the CSI shows with the trying to enhance the image. We had a really blurry image before. Doesn't mean that image was wrong, but as we gather more evidence, as we ask more questions, as we figure things out, it gives us a clearer picture along the way. And so sometimes science can be a little messy as that happens, but we're always striving to get a better understanding of the world. And we're seeing that happen in real time every single day with the coronavirus. And I think it reminds us of our jobs as science educators to tell that process story, that messy side of science, so that we all understand how science is working and striving to get us that clearer picture. So I think that brings us to the stories, because I realized this when also writing this talk and digging deeper, that a lot of the stories that were coming out that I wanted to talk about were the things that were that messy process of science. It wasn't, let's just get into the weeds of the data. It was more, how is this happening and what's the story behind how we got to where we currently understand what's going on, and what are the new questions that are coming up. And I think a really great story is probably one of the best known ones from this year, which is the Great Fainting of Betelgeuse, which it's also called the Great Dimming, but I like the Great Fainting because it got into my head this image of Betelgeuse like going, oh, exactly, Rachel. Oh. And so now you have that image in your head and you're welcome. But we saw Betelgeuse change its brightness. We know it's variable. You can see that this is the Betelgeuse data for about 7 years. You can see there's some variability in there. But then at the end of last year, around November, it started getting really, really dim, hitting a minimum around February, and then getting brighter again. Orion's belt makes for a nice fainting couch. Yes. I like this interaction with the chat. This is nice. But we saw it get really, really dim, even dimmer than Bellatrix. And we also managed to get some very large telescope observations where we can actually spatially resolve Betelgeuse. That's a really nice thing about Betelgeuse, is it's close enough that we can resolve it. And we saw that there was a dimmer hemisphere. It wasn't over the whole star. There was a hemisphere that was dimmer. And so this started us figuring out like what's going on. We want to know what's going on. And it was one of those things where we could share with our audience, go outside and look, you can see this event happening right now. So there are several ideas that came up. The first one was, it's about to supernova. We all heard that one, right? Because everyone knows that Betelgeuse is going to supernova one day. You know why they know? Because we tell them in our domes. I know I tell them in our domes all the time. So of course, everyone's mind goes that it's going to explode. So is it about to explode? No, it's starting to go back up. So we're pretty sure that's not happening. Another idea was it is a known variable star. So maybe these different variability cycles were lining up for like an extra deep minima, but that didn't seem to be it either. Ultimately, there were two different stories that were coming out, two different ideas. Was there a giant sunspot on the star, or rather star spot, I should say, or was there a big cloud of something blocking the light from Betelgeuse? And so this is, so one of the very first studies that came out was from Levesque and Massey in 2020. This came out in March. And they wanted to compare the effective temperature of Betelgeuse from 2004, from data set that they had from 2004, and then a new data set that they got in 2020 to look at it. They tried to recreate the exact telescope conditions that they originally had in 2004 in order to look at that. And they did see a difference. And so when you model out that black body spectrum, so here you can see the spectrum in 2004 up top, and then down below we have the 2020. And there was a noticeable difference. So in 2004, it was about 3650 Kelvin versus 3600 Kelvin in 2020. So it's about a 50 Kelvin degree difference. With error bars, it could be as much as 100. So not significant enough to explain the dimming. And I did a quick calculation just to see like what expectation and difference of magnitude that would have been. And it was about a 0.06 magnitude difference. So really not the level of difference that we were seeing. And so they were suggesting that this cannot then be something inherent to the star or to the star's photosphere and atmosphere because the effective temperature didn't change enough. So it was likely some sort of dust cloud that was in front of Betelgeuse, causing it to dim. So then another study came out in about June-ish, from Dharmawardena et al. That looked at data in the sub-millimeter from the James Clerk Maxwell telescope. And they saw that there was a dimming of 20% in the sub-millimeter wavebands, so in the radio. And this is not something you would expect with a large dust cloud, because dust clouds generally block optical light, not radio light. But they double checked, they did a radiative transfer model to make sure that that wouldn't explain it, and it wouldn't within their models. So they suggested that it was indeed a star spot, but it was one where you had about 50% of the star covered with a star spot with its own effective temperature of 3250, while the rest of the star remained 3650, or it was more of the star covered at 70% with less of a temperature difference. And then they modeled that with an asymmetric, sort of this asymmetric temperature across the star, and were able to reproduce the same spectra that Levesque and Massey measured. So they were suggesting then it was something inherent to the star. It couldn't be a dust object in front of the star because of that. So then we have another study that comes out from Andrea Dupre from the Center for Astrophysics. And so they looked at a lot of different data. So Dupre et al. Have been looking at Betelgeuse for over a year, including the dimming event and after. So they were able to actually look at what was happening with the star in the months leading up to the dimming event to see what was going on. So one of the first things that they looked at was radial velocity measurements. So they used the Stella telescope, I believe in Tenerife. And what they were able to see is here's the magnitude on the left side, and you can see it sort of matches over on the right side to this pulsation cycle. So they're measuring how it was pulsing. And so right before the event, right before it started to dim, it was pulsing outward. All right. Then they used Hubble to look at the magnesium lines in the spectra and the ultraviolet flux. Now, these images, each line here is for a specific date for each one of these. So the circles represent October 6, 2019. The squares are September 18th, 2019, and so on. And then these different points are for along the star, basically. So they were able, because it's spatially resolved, they're able to measure it at different points along the disk of the star itself. And so what they noticed is that the magnesium 2 lines were brightest in the southeast corner in October, right before it started to dim. Same with the UV flux. So we got an increase in UV from the southeast corner of the star right before it started to dim. Then they looked at carbon 2 lines and the ratio between them, which measures electron density. And so again, right before the dimming event, sorry, my phone rang. So right before the dimming event, this ratio was very low, which suggests a much higher electron density. So this is suggesting a warm, dense plasma in the southeast corner of the star, so that you can compare the whole star to that southeast corner in red again. So putting all of this together, what this suggests is that right before there was a large clump of plasma that got coughed out by Betelgeuse, and that was pushed out and aided by the star pulsing outward. Whoa, sorry, that was on my camera. So it's pulsing outward, and then it cooled very quickly to make a dust cloud. So this is, and that's supported as well by another study, Safonov et al. In 2020, that was looking at the polarization of light around Betelgeuse, and dust tends to polarize light more. And so that's suggesting that there was a dust cloud that was blocking Betelgeuse for this time. This isn't the full picture, though. This still gives us more questions. One, they don't really address the sub-millimeter dimming in the paper, so it's not clear why that was happening to me. Also, Betelgeuse is starting to dim again. So what's happening? We're seeing that happen. And then on top of that, this has been seen before in other stars, but it's always been along the rotational axis and not offset like this one. And so it's not clear why that was happening. So like any good science project, you can get results and you can make that picture clearer, but it's going to lead to more questions that we're going to then have to answer later on. And so we're always striving to get that clearer picture along the way. Okay. The next story is an impossible black hole, which makes me think of a Doctor Who episode in the David Tennant era, if anyone knows that one. It involved the devil. So that was an interesting one. But the impossible black hole was an interesting one because, one, it seemed really weird, the result that they got. But they saw a B star in the galactic plane. It was wobbling. So that suggested that it was orbiting around something else, but you couldn't see that something else. So based off of that wobble, depending on the inclination of the system, they figured out that it was something that was between about 6 to 225 solar masses. So if it's something that big that you can't see, it's probably a black hole. So then they were trying to figure out, there was this H alpha emission line that they were seeing as well. So they thought it was probably coming from a disk. So it could either be around the whole system, so a circumbinary disk, or just around the black hole. And they thought it was just around the black hole. And so then they used the width of this H alpha line in order to measure the mass of the black hole. And so the shape of this suggested to them that it was something that wasn't face on, but a little bit off. Because if this disk were edge on, what would happen if you have a line? So here we have sort of a regular line almost in red. But if it's edge on, you have part of the disk moving towards you, so that gets blue shifted. So that'll blue shift the line a little bit. And then on the other side, the disk is moving away from you, which red shifts the line. So you end up with this double peaked line thing going on. So as you increase the decrease the inclination towards face on, that it still widens a little bit, but you don't see the double peaks. And so that's what they thought was going on. And they used this to measure the mass of the black hole and figured out that it was around 68 solar masses. Now, this is weird. You might have heard me say earlier that the largest stellar mass black hole that we can have is about 25 solar masses. This is particularly true of things with solar metallicity. So with the current level of metals that we see in the population of sun-like stars. And this star, this B star, had solar metallicity values. And that limits how big a star can get, which limits how big a black hole can be after that star dies, which means our peak is about 25 solar masses. They thought maybe it was 2 solar mass black holes, or 2 stellar mass black holes around 35 each, but that's still both bigger than we would normally expect to find. So this is why it was called an impossible black hole. This seemed really, really weird. So immediately people were like, I don't think that's right. And there was very quickly, in quick succession, several papers that came out, including these 2 by Al-Badri and Quartet and Abdul Masih et al., who one looked at the data again and one took their own data for this system and said, you know what, you're not taking into account the fact that the B star has its own H alpha absorption line. So as that B star orbits, its line is going to be blue shifted and red shifted, its absorption line. So it's going to take away from some of this emission line from whatever disk is out there. So it's going to make it artificially look like it's a really weird shaped line due to a black hole disk. And it's likely a circumbinary disk that has an absorption line kind of wobbling around in it. And so when you do that, you get a much more reasonable mass for the other object around, I'm blanking on the exact number, but in that 6 to 10 solar mass range, or they were suggesting it could even be something else and not even a black hole. So what we saw here is science happens. It's also something done by humans. And so sometimes mistakes are going to be made. And the authors of the original paper said, yeah, you know what, we did mess up here. We did forget to take that into account. They didn't completely agree with the conclusions of the other papers, but they agreed that they did not take the absorption lines into account. So it's okay to make mistakes as well, as long as you admit to them and correct your mistake along the way. All right. Another one is this really cool image from ALMA of misaligned planetary disks. And so we all probably remember the ALMA image from several years ago that showed the lovely disk of planetary disks forming around another star. Well, here's another one, but look at it. Look closely. Do you notice anything weird about it? I'm going to just wait for the chat because I think I'm talking really fast, so I think I have some time. Does anyone notice anything weird? If not, that's okay. The hole on the inside that they're misaligned, but you can't quite tell that they're misaligned. Yeah, if you just look at it, it really does look a lot like the center circle is face on while the others are offset. Yeah, the central lobe is circular and not oval. So when we generally see these images, we'll see sort of these concentric circles with gaps in them because it's this one whole disk that has the gaps in it. That's what we've seen before. But if you look at this, the central one looks a little bit off center from the other two, and it's circular compared to the ovals that we see here. And if you look carefully, you might notice that like some of the ovals are even, one is more ovally than the other. So this is what suggests that it's misaligned from this data, from looking at it. So immediately folks were going through and trying to model it. And so B et al. Tried to model this. So they're like, well, what if they're all circular orbits? Then they added in eccentric orbits, and then they added in inclinations into their various models to see which one was the best fit. And what they found was this model right here was the best fit to the data, and that you have sort of offset from the main star system in the middle, which is a triple star system. I forgot to mention that. There's a triple star system in the center, and then you have an inner ring that's tilted. The middle ring is tilted even more, and then the outer ring even more. There, this is a new dance. So what that's suggesting is that these disks are misaligned, and this is expected within the theory for disks around multiple star systems. That you have lots of different gravitational effects from the different stars orbiting each other that you end up warping the disk. Another study led by Krauss at the same time, Krauss et al., they were studying the 3D models, and specifically they were looking at the data, and they were seeing shadows from each of the disks being projected onto the other ones. So that allowed them to get a slightly clearer picture, and this is their model over here. If you go to their paper, and I'll have that paper cited in the proceedings, you can actually interact with this. So you can rotate it around and kind of see what's going on. So what they were modeling was that you have this sort of separate inner ring. And then this right here is you have another disk that's sort of warping on the inside like this. Woo! But you can see that warpage happening right there. And this, again, is expected. It's a phenomenon called disk tearing, and it's something that hadn't really been observed before. But what makes this an interesting story is it was two different studies that came to a very similar conclusion, similar results. But how they're interpreting it is slightly different based off of the data that they have. So Krauss et al., they're saying that this is just the disk tearing that we expect. We have all these different gravitational effects. It's warping and breaking the disk along the way into these three separate parts. And they're saying you could potentially form a planet from one of these disks and have basically a very offset wide orbit planet around a multiple star system. Whereas B et al., they don't think that the disk tearing alone can explain the current shape. So they think there might already be a planet there doing that. So again, same data, same results, but a slightly different interpretation because we can't go there and see what's going on. And so this is again part of how the process of science is trying to come up with better explanations for that evidence that we do have. Which brings us to Uranus. So how many of you have done solar system tours in your dome? How many of you, when you get to Uranus, what's the fun fact you tell? It's tipped on its side. Thank you, Ailina. That was very beautiful. It's tipped on its side. And why is it tipped on its side? Something hit it, right? Something early on in its formation hit it. And so now it has an axial tilt of about 98 degrees. Why though? Because that idea of something hitting it is a little hard to swallow. There's some issues with it. And that's another thing about science is sometimes we're looking at things so far away from when they actually happened that the evidence that we have is just a property that it has, and now we have to try to explain it. And we have to use that science, we have to use our better understanding of the laws of physics, for instance, to try to explain what's going on. So the reason why there's some problems with this is that actually a single impact is not enough to knock it completely over on its side. It would likely need about 3. It has a very similar spin rate to Neptune as well, which suggests that they formed at the same time under similar conditions. So if Uranus had gotten hit multiple times by a very large object, it would have changed its spin rate. So it wouldn't be so similar to Neptune. Also, these impacts would have vaporized a lot of the ice surrounding it, which would have resulted in more rocky moons than icy moons, which is not what we see. So a team led by Rogozinski and Hamilton, they suggested a different idea, this idea of a spin-orbit resonance. And this has been suggested for trying to explain why Saturn has a tilt, that Saturn's spin and the orbital precession of Neptune were in a resonance at some point, and basically those gravitational vectors all added up to kind of push Saturn off to the side. So what they're suggesting here is something similar with Uranus, but Uranus's spin orbital or spin precession and its orbital precession are in a resonance, and together that's tilting it down. But that's not enough to explain it either. So if you add in a circumplanetary disk that then accretes onto Uranus, that gives you a slightly additional vectors in order to kind of push it down. So they ran several different models of how this disk might accrete. And through these models, we're able to get to a point where Uranus was tipped over by about 70 degrees, which is still not what we see. But then all you need is a single giant impact to knock it over the rest of the way. And so this is, again, science is never a simple process. We're always trying to get the better picture. Now, we can't go back in time and check on this, but this is at least an idea that fits with what we do see and our understanding of physics a little bit better right now. Okay. For the last part, the last 13 minutes or so that we have, this is a great year for comets. And I kind of wrote this part before I got into like, well, let's look at these other stories that show the messy side of science. So it might not fit quite as well, but it's still really neat because it was the year of comets. And I was particularly excited about Neowise because it seemed like a literal bright spot in what is a very difficult year. I think I've been missing my dome. I know we've all been missing our domes. We've been missing interacting with our audiences and seeing those bright shining faces in our buildings. And this was a chance where I got to go outside and see the comet and help people go see that comet as well. And they were interacting with us on Facebook. And it reminded me like why we do what we do in when I had been missing it a lot. So this was a fantastic moment. And how many of you went out and took some pictures of the comet? I know I saw some beautiful pictures. A lot of you took great pictures. Bob Bonador, I saw your talk the other day. You took a beautiful picture on your cell phone. This is my cell phone picture. Who sees it? Who sees the comet? Oh, Eric sees it. All right, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to circle it. Does that help? Okay. Oh, someone's calling me on my office phone.
Ring, ring.
And then it forwards to my cell phone. I'm sorry about that, guys. Okay, there we go. All right, so here, I'll zoom in so you can see it. See that smudge of light? There you go. That's Comet Neowise. I am so popular. Who knows who's calling me? All right, so that's my picture of Comet Neowise. I downloaded this app 5 minutes before I took this picture, and it was in a very light polluted area. So I'm going to call this a win. Hooray. And Neowise was, I think, one of those really exciting moments because we all got to go outside and see it. But I can't answer right now. Okay. I'm muting that. Okay. So, all right. What was, I think, a really interesting comet, though, in terms of science, there might be some really great stuff around Neowise that's going to be coming out. It might have come out since I wrote this part of the talk. But there was also Comet Atlas that we heard a lot about. I think a lot of people were getting really excited about this sort of at the start of the year. And so we got really excited, and then the whole thing fizzled out. It was predicted to get up to about 0 magnitude, and then we didn't see it. And so what was happening is it ended up disintegrating, and you can see this. So this is the apparent magnitude. You can see as it got closer to perihelion down here, it got brighter and brighter, and around 70 days before perihelion, it started to fade out, and we saw this in different wave bands. On top of that, it also got bluer. And so this is suggesting that disintegration before we could actually image any disintegration. So another study from Zubko et al., they looked at the polarized light. So again, if the dustier something is, the more polarized the light is, the more directional it is, because there's the dust grains themselves are asymmetrical. And so it's more likely to bounce off of the long edge. And so that's why we get more directional light. And so they looked at this compared to other comets. And what they also found was that it was pretty much all carbonaceous material. And this is really important for us because comets are some of the oldest things in our solar system. They have the primordial material of our solar system stuck inside them. But because they come so close to the sun processes the surface of it and changes it. So the actual untouched, primordial, pristine solar system stuff is buried really deep inside the comet. And so when it disintegrated like this, we were actually able to see that primordial material burst out, basically, so that we could understand and study that a little bit more. There's also another comet that came through that was pretty exciting. It was discovered in August of last year by Gennady Borisov, and this was our first confirmed interstellar comet. So unlike Oumuamua, there's some possibility that might have been a comet. This one had really obvious outgassing, so we know that this was a comet. And so there's been some fun detective work with this one. The comet came through and they were able to sort of map out and extend out its orbit. And so they took that along with Gaia data on the stars in our galaxy and their proper motion and wound time back to figure out which stars it came within 1 parsec of in the past. And so there were 14 possibilities. The reason why it was 1 parsec is because, for reference, within our solar system, the Oort cloud goes out to about 0.01 to about 1 parsec. So 1 parsec would be in the outer limit of our Oort cloud. And so they were kind of looking at something similar there.
Hey.
And the closest one that they came to was Ross 573, because it came into 0.1 parsec of that star. So they think possibly that's the star it originated from about 900,000 years ago. Why it got ejected is unclear. It's one idea was that maybe another star came rather close to this star and then ejected it. But they could not find any stars in the Gaia data that would have gone close enough. So we're going to have to we're going to have to see what else we can find from this, but it's on its way out. We're not going to get to see it again. So we're going to have to use the data we did manage to get in order to study what's going on. But this is, I think, really fun and exciting moments for us in science to try to understand what's going on, while also understanding that science is messy and it's going to lead to new questions that will hopefully help us get clearer and clearer pictures along the way. So, oh, right. I also found water. I forgot about this slide. They also looked at the water measurements using oxidized, an O1 line. That's a proxy for water that gets, it occurs when you photodisassociate water in comets. And so they studied it, and they also found that this interstellar comet was a bit gassy compared to the ones in our solar system and had maybe slightly more than average water, but was still within the limits of what we see in the solar system. So it's rather similar to what we have in our solar system, which helps us understand how other star systems might have formed and other solar systems. So there's probably more work to come on that. But are there any questions? Yes, it was a bad time, Mark Percy. All right. And now this is when the heater in my office decides to start banging too, so I'm sorry.
I've been monitoring the chat, but you seem to have got all the questions as they came in. So we just have some good jobs, and that this is their favorite, which is personally my favorite part of the lecture. So, you know, I really appreciate being able to see this. So
I actually had a question, Shannon. How do you explain to audiences resonance and different kinds of resonances?
So the way I usually explain it, I usually talk about it in terms of the asteroid belt and the Kirkwood gaps. But it's the idea of when something goes around the sun, a resonance would be something that goes around an integer of that. I'm not doing a great job right now. But so basically for every one time something goes around, something else goes around 2 or 3 or 4 times. And so they kind of meet up a bit more frequently. And so with this type of resonance, it's a similar idea in that how with Uranus in particular, a planet wobbles around like a top, and so there's this spin that's happening because of that wobble of that, where that axis, that axial tilt points. But also orbits are not perfect circles, they're ellipses, and so there's a precession of where that ellipse essentially points as well. And so there's a matching up of those two different motions essentially in a way that they're kind of pulling on the planet more. So it lines up. All right. You're all welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Great. Well, you still have some time, Shannon, if you want to give over your time to the next person, that's fine with you, but it's fine with me, whatever you'd like to do.
No, I think I don't have anything else unless there's any other questions, but thank you all for listening, and stay safe, everybody. And I miss you. I'm going to say that. I really miss getting to give you all hugs this year. It's nice to see you virtually, but I really miss seeing everybody in person. So next year, we'll save it all up for next year for extra big hugs.
Shannon, I have a question. Mm-hmm. When you touch on the media kind of misrepresenting some scientific knowledge, mm-hmm. and of course they're hunting for flashy things, so people will click on this. Do you have any thoughts on how to take that, or what to do besides saying, "Oh, that's wrong"?
I mean, I think my initial thought in what I try to practice in a lot of things is the yes and, because if you read the articles themselves, they often do a decent job of trying to explain sort of the subtleties that you can't get in the title of the article. So you can say, yes, we found this gas, and it could point towards life, and here are also the reasons why it might not, and why this is such a beautiful thing about science. So you can take that and expand upon it in a way that's not like, well, they're just totally wrong, but it's more complicated than that. So if we share this, say, on our social media pages, we can say, here's a really interesting story, and you can expand a little bit on that to encourage people to think more about what they're reading. You can put it into your programming and have a chat about it. Because usually also when there's something really exciting like this, we're going to get asked about it. Some of us did media appearances, so that's a chance for us to communicate that. But in our own domes, when people are coming through, any place that we're talking about it, we can kind of offer the bigger picture. And that means also if in times when we are in our dome saying, hey, here's a really cool news story, let's talk about that a little bit more. So I don't think we're going to get the news media to stop printing sensationalized article titles, but we can say, and there's more.
All right, that is all of your time. So thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate hearing this each and every year, even, all that. So the next up, we have Ken Yeager from Seiler Zeiss. So whenever you're ready, Ken, go ahead and start sharing. Did I make you I don't know if I made you a co-host. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Let me find you real quick. I'm so sorry. There you go. So you should be able to start sharing your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay. And you should see the slideshow. There we go. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Ken Yeager. For those that don't know me, I think I know most of you, but if I don't, please reach out and be happy to get to know you. Like everyone else, wish we could be there together. We all understand, unfortunately, why we can't, so I won't belabor that. But for those that don't know me, I'm Ken Yeager, independent sales representative working with Seiler Instruments Planetarium Division. And Seiler are very happy to celebrate 75 years in business this year. And they're also exclusive partners with Zeiss, who have a 99-year jump on Seiler. We'll be celebrating 174 years in November. So the first thing I'd like to talk about are the Zeiss Velvet LEDs premiered last year at GLPA in the United States with the enhanced true black projection technology. So it's been expanded upon with the transition to an LED light engine. So color, focus, brightness, things like that are greatly improved. And you have immediate on-off for your power, so there's no warm-up, cool-down cycle. And in terms of sustainability and being good for the environment, no lamps, no hazardous materials. Also lowers your operating costs with no inventory of lamps. There's no color wheel, less moving parts, less things to go wrong. So the extended service life in the transition from lamp to LED has increased the service life by about 40%. It's still the only digital projector specifically designed for planetaria. So you retain that true black sky. You don't see that gray that is often prevalent in digital projections. You keep the black levels in your content. And also with the fantastic black levels, you don't require mechanical edge blending. There's no masking, anything like that, and the system auto-calibrates. Zeiss optics, of course, we all know are fantastic, highest light transmissions and incredible sharpness of focus. These projectors are still 2560 by 1600, but I've seen them side by side with 4K projectors that we also sell, and they more than hold their own. And just an incredible contrast ratio, 2.5 million to 1. You look at the specs on other projectors, you might see a lot less. And to give an example of the lack of the need for edge blending, here are two velvets projecting red monochromatic on a dome. This is an actual photograph of a projection on dome, and the blend zone is in the dead center of the image. There are no artifacts of blending because you don't require the mechanical masks. And then you can see the transition from lamp to LED, the improvement in color and brightness, and that black sky is so prevalent against those stars. And then for some non-astronomy content, you can really see the improvements in the color space and the brightness here. So what else has Zeiss been working on? Asterion. This is the new small profile optomechanical solution that comes in two sizes, Asterion for 8 meter to 14 meter, which is available now, and Asterion Premium for larger domes, 14 to 18 meters, will be available early next year, and all versions are suitable for tilted domes. It's got a very small footprint, roughly 25.5 inches wide at the base, and it is designed for hybrid use. Asterion projects stars, Milky Way, deep sky objects, and then your digital solution in the hybrid providing the rest. Hopefully a Zeiss Velvet LED solution where they would work seamlessly together, but Asterion is compatible with other vendor solutions. Uncompromised stars, dynamic smooth motions are great features. It slews really fast, up to 60 degrees a second. So it's, it can move just as fast as your digital platform that you're working in concert with. If you got a Zeiss solution, complete integration with UniView. Sun, Moon, and Planets are standard on Asterion Premium, and it's an optional add-on for the Asterion base unit. The new Milky Way for both is the Gaia data of over 1 billion stars. Yes.
You are out of time, so go ahead and just wrap up what you were saying.
Sure. Okay, I had a minute left on my timer, I thought. So, okay. Yeah. So fiber optic technology, the stars are done directly. Lowest power consumption. Again, no lamps like the Velvets. It's great quality, a lot lower cost than previous Zeiss optomechanicals. There's a peek at it. And then also one last point, UniView Open Dome is coming soon. This is going to be a third new platform in UniView to stream any third-party applications, Stellarium, Worldwide Telescope, Open Space, VJ Solutions, and so on. And it's a software and hardware component. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ken Yeager and Seiler Zeiss. I apologize for needing you to speed up a little bit about that, but we.
It's okay.
So next up we have Mike Smale. Let me see. So it's going to be our second to last paper. Mike Smale, 5 cities, 50 years, 5,000 miles, a remarkable afterlife of America's first planetary projector. So if there's...
I am ready. Was there not a 5-minute break before my talk?
Oh. Yeah, there is. Okay. I'm getting really ahead of myself. So we do have a 5-minute break. I am going to share my screen and show off the sponsors and those things. So getting a little ahead of myself. So I apologize for that, everyone. I want to thank all of our sponsors for today, Spitz and Seiler and Zeiss. Thank you so much for making GLPA 2020 possible. And so this break is going on for a little bit. So I think 1:45 or 1:40. Excuse me. Yes, 1:40. Please be back by 1:40 and we will start the next presentation. So thank you very much. It is now 1:40. Mike, are you ready to go, or do you want to wait a minute? All right, sounds good. Okay. All right, Mike, go on ahead, and I can give you those times during your talk. Like when you're at 10 minutes and stuff. All right.
Excellent. Much appreciated.
No problem.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Smale. I'm with the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, Illinois. And what I'm giving now is kind of an update on a talk I delivered on the IPS History of the Planetarium webinar that was mentioned yesterday, and also an earlier Dome Dialogue session, but all about the Adler's original Zeiss star projector. So in January of 1970, the Adler Planetarium deinstalled that original projector, which was the first in the Western Hemisphere, and shipped it to Jackson, Mississippi, where it was going to be reinstalled in a soon-to-be-built city planetarium. But when the Russell C. Davis Planetarium opened in downtown Jackson in 1978, the installed projector was a Minolta S4. So what happened to the Adler Zeiss? Why wasn't it installed? And where is it now? Well, these questions have been the source of a fair bit of online discussion among planetarium historians and collectors, and now we have the answers. But first, a bit of backstory. Excuse me. The Zeiss Mark II was in place for Adler's opening, May 12th, 1930. In 1960, the Adler upgraded their projector to a Model 3, which added those additional collars at the base of each starball, the added individual projectors for more bright stars, a better moon projector, and improved star plates. But by 1968, Zeiss had released their newest large planetarium projector, which was the Model 6, and the Adler was in the middle of researching what our next projector purchase would be. Now, coincidentally, that same year, William Clark, president of Observadome in Jackson, Mississippi, approached the Adler to ask if we would be willing to sell our projector. Now, Zeiss had already declined to offer Adler any sort of trade-in credit on our projector, so this seemed like a good chance to earn some additional money, but also to ensure that the planetarium could continue to educate audiences in the future. Now, like many communities around the country at that time, Jackson was attempting to access matching funding from the National Defense Education Act to make the purchase. And in order to make those timelines, Observadome acted as sort of a go-between, purchasing the projector from the Adler and selling it to Jackson. So December 31st, 1969 was the Model 2-3's last day in operation. Technicians from Adler and Observadome spent the next 2 weeks carefully disassembling it and packing it into the same crates that the Mark VI had just arrived in from Oberkochen, Germany. So as I mentioned before, the Davis Planetarium opened in 1978, but not with the Adler Zeiss. And the reason for that is that when the team in Jackson looked into the actual costs to reconstruct and to update the Zeiss, they found it was going to cost over $200,000. And when they reached out to planetarium manufacturers for bid quotes, they got an offer from Vulex, who at the time was Minolta's U.S. distributor, that was about $100,000 less. Vulex also offered them $30,000 in trade on their projector. So I can't say I fault them. I understood why they made that decision, and they got 35 good years of use out of that new projector. Adler Zeiss, meanwhile, found itself being shipped to Vulex's Long Island warehouse space, where it sat for the next year or two. Now, in 1980, Vulex Audiovisual went bankrupt. The freight and shipping company that owned their warehouse began calling up Zeiss planetariums around the country looking for somebody interested in purchasing the Adler Zeiss. One of their calls was to Sam Mims, who was one of the 2 planetarium curators at the Louisiana Arts and Science Center in Baton Rouge. Now, Sam realized the importance of the object and was concerned over the danger that it could be scrapped. So he got a few investors together, including his father and co-curator, and they agreed to purchase the projector. Sam visited New York, inspected it, looked at the records, determined it was the Adler Zeiss. And the Adler Zeiss was then shipped to Sam's father's chemical warehouse in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, at this time, the Louisiana Art and Science Center also had a Zeiss Model 3. It had originally been installed as a Model 2 in Griffith, was then updated and sold to LASC. But Sam and Wayne, they weren't looking to use the projector for spare parts. They wanted to get in the hands of someone who could preserve it and who could hold on to it. So this group ran ads in Astronomy and Sky and Telescope, even the Planetarian, looking for a buyer. This ad is from the second issue of the 1983 Planetarian. And by 1987, they found a buyer. Don Greider, who was a solar engineer from Mechanicsburg, Ohio, arranged to purchase Adler Zeiss with the goal of reassembling it in his workshop. Now, that was the last time that anybody saw or heard about the Adler Zeiss for over 20 years. Some of you may recall, Adler found ourselves thrust into the political spotlight in 2008 as a certain presidential candidate derogatorily accused another candidate of requesting a $3 million earmark for the Adler to buy an overhead projector. As a result, we found ourselves making numerous statements to the press about the differences between a classroom overhead projector and the latest in high-end planetarium technology. Now, Don Greider happened to catch a piece on NPR about this, and he gave the Adler a call, offering his services to either machine new replacement parts for our now almost 40-year-old Zeiss Mark VI. Don also let slip that, oh, by the way, I have your original Zeiss projector crated up in my warehouse. This led to a series of phone calls and even an in-person visit over the next few years. But by the end of 2012, Don had dropped out of communication. Fast forward to February 17th of this year, and we received a voicemail forwarded from the museum's main line. It was Don Greider's son, Ken. He was making arrangements to clear out this barn's warehouse and wanted to know if we were interested in purchasing our Zeiss. Well, on February 29th, a small group from the Adler drove out to the Greider farm in Mechanicsburg, Ohio, in an attempt to verify, one, that it was the Adler Zeiss, and two, to inspect the condition of the parts. So, what all did we find? Outside of the barn, we found a huge wooden crate covered in tarpaulin and held down by tires and cinder blocks and all sorts of fun things. Inside of it, we found the center axle piece of a Model 2, Model 3 era Zeiss projector. Inside the barn, we found component parts of a Zeiss system all over the place. These are the north and south, the starball lamps would sit inside these and then be latched into the starball with the original German writing still on them. We found the uplights that were mounted on either side of the projector that would illuminate the theater from the center. We found constellation projectors. So on the upper left, that's the planetarium in New York City. So Zeiss made a constellation projector, like a drum apparatus that would be mounted at the console, but Adler went a different way. Adler had 16 of these individual projectors, which you can see on the upper right and there at the bottom, that were mounted to the starball support structure. And this allowed us to be a little more creative with constellations. I'll explain that in just a second. We found about 4 dozen envelopes containing slide constellations, not just the Western artwork, but in a lot of cases, variations on as such. So these are all the slides that were in the Orion folder, for example. You can see the classic Western artwork, various other cultural representations, and the one down at the bottom center, the number 15 football player, we're pretty sure that's Ed Brown, who was the quarterback of the Chicago Bears from 1954 to 1961. The other advantage of having a series of constellation projectors that you could aim is that you could then, in effect, make larger, almost all-sky projectors. And in these slide envelopes, we found representations of both Quetzalcoatl and the goddess Nut that would be projected from 6 to 8 projectors and cover a wide swath of the dome. We found the original, the handheld pointer, 2 of them actually, one and a spare. Additional accessories, this is your ring structure for projecting your nautical triangle. We found the actual star projectors themselves. These would be mounted inside the star ball in the series of lenses and the star plate apparatus, and the mercury gravity weight shutter on those. We found the star balls, north and southern hemisphere star balls. We found the planet cages. Here's your south planet cage with Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter on the inside of it. And I should mention these were all very clearly German crates. They were labeled as such, and we were able to track the shipping from Oberkochen to Chicago, from Chicago down to Jackson, and eventually up to Mechanicsburg, Ohio, from Baton Rouge to Mechanicsburg. Last but not least, the piece de resistance. Inside the North Planet cage, there was still a great deal of aged newspaper crumpled up in the packing material. And on further assembly, there we found the December 21st, 1969 issue of the Chicago Tribune used as packing material in this original projector. So we went back to worked out a deal, went back in early June, loaded up as many of the small pieces and parts as we could in the Adler minivan. And then we went back one more time at the end of June to remove the larger crates. The crate that had been stored outside with the centerpiece had to be disassembled. It was actually starting to rot and fall into disrepair. So this is a 3,000 plus pound piece of machinery that we had to crane up and out of the existing out of the existing crate. The shipping company then recreated it and delivered it back to the Adler. One last neat little thing that we found inside that outdoor crate was a kind of a Happy New Year message from the Zeiss employees at the factory in Oberkochen. They had written it there 18th of December, 1969, and they all signed it before they crated up our 6 and shipped it to us in Chicago. The projector now is in our offsite warehouse on the south side of the city, and we are beginning investigations for how we can restore it, how we can maintain it. Our goal is to reassemble it for display at the Adler at some point in the future, not in an operational format, but in physical display. So we're working on that now. So thank you very much for your time. I see I'm actually just right about on time, which is great. Jackie, how are things in the comments?
Not too many actual comments or questions, but like Jim Schweitzer wants to know, says, I lost my slide rule back around that time and when this projector left. Do you think you found it in one of the crates?
I haven't seen any slide rules, Jim. Sorry about that. There were some things, for example, the original Adler console, the wood framing around the console was shipped out and that got lost. There were some smaller pieces that we've determined kind of got lost along the way as they were sort of disposed of in various locations for various reasons. But the core of the projector is there, and that's the important part.
Great. Well, a lot of people are very interested with this whole presentation. This is a really cool presentation. So thank you very much, Mike Smell, for giving us this information. This is awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions for Mike before he decides to just not answer anymore? I don't know. Charlie, great to see the efforts to restore this combination of art and science. Please let us know if we can be of any additional assistance. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, will do. Thanks, Charlie.
There's a question from Mark Percy. Did Zeiss have any useful records?
So we have in the Adler's collection a lot of records of our communication with Zeiss, really from 1930. I mean, for as long as we had the projectors. So those were very useful aids, and they detailed a lot of the specifics, the times when equipment was shipped, when we contracted things. We had complaints about the original moon projector for like 15 years that got fixed with the 3 upgrade. So there's a lot in there. We are going to be reaching out to Zeiss as we determine, because again, we have several thousand pounds of metal that we have to figure out a way to sort of safely, reassemble. And we know that, not all the screws and holes are going to be there and things like that. So we will be reaching out to Zeiss once we get a little closer to the physical reassembly point.
Julie would like to know how much storage does the Adler have in its offsite?
Not enough. It's maybe 800 square feet. It's in this really kind of, it's not a shady building, but it's in a storage facility, right? And it's this big kind of caged off section of one of the floors. It's enough room to hold. We also have our original Zeiss, our Mark 6. We have it there. We have our Digistar that was at the heart of our Star Rider. That's there. We have some old exhibit pieces. We also have bits and pieces of the New York Hayden Planetarium's Mark 6 as well. So it's a decent size, but it's not enough room that we could do the restoration work there. So we've been eyeing the possibility of bringing the projector on site to the Adler and possibly having that restoration work happen in the public space, like out on the floor where people could watch. But that's still to be finalized.
All right. So I don't really see any other questions. So if anybody has any more questions, feel free to message Mike in the chat and we can move on to our final paper of the day. Sean Lashitz. I've never said your last name out loud, so I'm sorry. If you're ready to go ahead and start presenting, go ahead. You can go ahead and get started.
Sure. All righty. Let me go ahead and put my...
Can you turn up your volume or anything? Because you're very, very quiet on my end anyways.
Let's see if I can do that as well. Is this better?
Sounds a little better for me.
All right.
All right. Well, go ahead whenever.
Gotcha. All righty. All right, so thanks for having me. I'm Sean Lotch, the director of, what I would say is an interesting situation, what used to be the Amera Astronomy Center, but I'll give you a bit of information on the next slide about our name change coming up that is going to be taking place here over the next few weeks, which is going to be kind of interesting. But today I'm going to be talking to you about the IPS SLU partnership, and how we're using it to provide stargazing, basically during this time of COVID. So we're a small university planetarium here at the University of Maine up in Orono, Maine. And we have a 10-meter dome with 50 seats. We have an 8-inch historic Alvin Clark refracting telescope that was originally installed on campus in 1901. It was constructed in 1898. And it's been moved 3 times, and we have it out back along with a research observatory next to it that has a 20-inch plane wave telescope. Our undergraduate students use the historic Alvin Clark for their observing projects Monday through Thursday evenings during the academic semesters. And then we also use this telescope for public observing, normally after our Friday night planetarium shows, plus for a variety of course, special events like the 2017 solar eclipse and things of that nature. Well, of course, with COVID, we couldn't do any of that. And so we had to make some changes. And so before I get into that, I guess one of the things I was mentioning is we used to be the Amera Astronomy Center. And as of yesterday, our name has officially changed to the Versant Power Astronomy Center because Amera, which was a power company, was bought out by Versant, and hence we're in the process of rebranding. So maybe next year I can tell you about that process and all the fun that's going to be taking place over the next few weeks with that. But the International Planetarium Society started a partnership with SLU. This was announced back in May of this year. And our planetarium looked into this. I had used SLU a long time back when I worked out in Hawaii at the planetarium out there, and we used it with some high school students at the time. And so I wanted to investigate this, and this partnership basically allowed planetariums who are members of IPS to create their own astronomy clubs, and then for half of the funds that came in through those for the subscription fee to using SLU to come back to the planetarium for them to, do the operations and things like that. So I put a little slide up here that has kind of some information about SLU. I'll get into more about what it's about, but there's sort of this interesting little thing it stands for, which is science, light pollution, oneness, origin stories, and hubris. But if you go to the SLU site, you can see all that, but it's kind of a fun, nice little way they came up with their acronym for what they're doing. So SLU basically is a system of robotic telescopes in 2 locations. Their primary location is in Tenerife at 28 degrees north latitude. There are 5 telescopes at this site, including a solar telescope. And then they have 3 telescopes in Chile at 33 degrees south. So what this gives folks is basically a chance using robotic telescopes to observe both the northern and southern hemisphere skies. And typically their telescopes are online for about 18 hours a day. So it provides quite a bit of coverage. For us here in Maine, it's almost perfect because Canary Islands comes online in the afternoons. For their nighttime observing, but their solar observing is, during the morning hours. And then by the time, it's getting dark here, normally Chile is also coming online or pretty close to it. SLU basically does a membership thing, and they have memberships start at $50 a year for what they call student memberships, which is their base level. You can also get apprentice, which gets you access to things like FITS files and scheduling more missions. And their astronomer level allows you to control filters and do a variety of special processing through the telescopes as well. And so when we started to talk about this, I reached out to their director of education, Russell Glenn. He was really helpful in getting us set up. Basically, we talked to him about, getting a club set up. We created a name, and then got a special code so that basically folks who would join our club could be put in directly into that group. So we called it the Universe Explorers of Maine. We tried to kind of come up with a name to cover as much of the state as we can, because we're really a planetarium in the center of the state, and we're one of the most active of the public planetariums here. So we really wanted to try to get as many folks involved in the club as possible. And we started the club up probably around end of, I would say sort of mid-end of June. And we've been doing online star parties basically at 8:30 p.m. Every Friday night ever since. And so one of the nice things is with this, you can use SLU to schedule missions, and create a variety of collections of images. They have quests where you can earn badges, and there's some gamification. You can go up levels through gravity points and things like that. But you really can get some beautiful astronomical images. All the astronomy images that you're seeing during this presentation, these are all taken through the SLU telescopes. And missions typically run between 5 to 10 minutes each, and you can see the image developing over time. So it really is like looking through a telescope, and the closest thing to doing so without, physically being at an eyepiece, you might say, in some way, shape, or form. What was nice about this for us too, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the interface here, is that it makes it very easy to conduct a star party. And you can pretty much conduct a star party with a single person. I know Krista Spate was talking yesterday about how, she's a one-person band. To a large extent, I am here as well at the University of Maine. I do have some grad students and undergrad students who work with me typically during the academic year, but during the summers, I'm all on my own, you might say. Here you can sort of see a little bit of the interface and the different levels. And if you just look over at the telescopes here, for instance, when these are online, they're all currently offline, but when they're online, there'll be a little green dot by them. And then if you just open up that interface, when they are online, you'll actually see the image that they're seeing through the telescope right there. And there'll be a little bar up at the top as a camera icon, and you just touch the camera icon to take a picture, and you can do so at any point during the time a mission is running, if you will. I mentioned they have a whole variety of different quests and things like that they have as well. And to give you an idea, the quests are basically little guided tours, if you will. You go in and you answer some questions, you collect some images, and then you read some documentation or basically read some information about things, and then you can do these different, quests and things like that. And there's a whole variety of those quests there. And I apologize, I have a phone ringing in the background as well, which I can't mute here in my office, so apologies on that. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. Hopefully that'll be finished here. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have weekly star parties on Friday nights at 8:30 p.m. And basically the way we do it is we have folks who are our members. We send it out through a Zoom webinar, and it's also broadcast out to the SLU community. And SLU also has a number of star parties they do. For instance, they just did one on this past week, Tuesday, for the opposition of Mars, to give you an idea. And they do other special ones as well. And what we do is we have people log into Zoom, but then also log into SLU, so they can be looking through the telescope with us as we're going over objects. And normally I'll end up setting up basically, what we're going to observe, in advance. And I have a list of objects that we're going to take a look at. We start with a traditional tour of the night sky using Stellarium. And it's really important to have dual monitors so that you can, basically have one monitor where you're doing things and the other where you can sort of have Zoom open and see what's happening on that side. And basically, once we finish our night sky tour, which is normally the first 10 to 12 minutes, then we jump into objects that we're looking at on these pre-scheduled missions in SLU. And we usually have a variety of things, everything from planets and the moon when it's around at the right time to a whole variety of deep sky objects. And we do a bit of northern and southern hemisphere. I primarily focus on northern hemisphere objects, things that our visitors could see here, but we do include some southern hemisphere objects as well, just because it's a nice way of sharing that there's more to the sky than just what we see here in Maine. And one of the things we learned is that it's really helpful too. The first ones were just sort of very general star parties, but having a theme really makes a difference. So we've had themes like, for instance, binocular objects of late summer, where we looked at objects that would primarily be, visible in binoculars and talked about that, and then would show some of those objects through SLU as well. And we would sort of jump back and forth between stellarium and SLU at that point, showing what a binocular field would look like if you had a 10 by 50 pair of binoculars, for instance, and then what the image through SLU would look like on their wide field telescopes, just to give folks an idea of what that might be. We also did star clusters of the Milky Way. And then last week, our star party, of course, was on Mars, because we were sort of between the closest approach and the opposition. And then, covered a variety of information on Mars there too. Normally, these have been conducted just by me. And then Russ is also there because they provide the link in most occasions for the star parties. And he kind of monitors the chat and will also ask some questions and things like that. I just have some images over here of some of the pictures through, and this was one of our binocular star party, so I created a little banner for that. And normally there's a discussion area on the club page that we post, sort of discussion things where we have sort of our upcoming star party and what its theme is. And then we also email directly out to all of the members in our club. We have about 70 members right now in our astronomy club since we started, and we're continuing to grow slowly, and we've been pushing it now with our regular public shows as well, as a way that folks can come back and observe. We did reopen in September, but we can only have 11 people in the planetarium, and we can't reopen the observatory, so we've been using this. Also in summer, we decided we wanted to pilot it with undergraduate astronomy labs. So I reached out to our undergraduate astronomy instructors and said, hey, this would be great, because they normally have an observing component that I mentioned earlier. So in summer, they had a class of 35, which is really manageable. So we actually stuck them in our initial club. They would do a weekly stargazing event or star party, which is outside of our standard star party for our club members, if you will. They had to post 3 observations in the observation area, which you can post in SLU and write an observation, and complete 2 of the quests, and then submit these final posters. So at the end of the quest, normally you've collected images and you've had a bunch of data, and then you can create these high-res posters. This is just a quick picture of it, but you could actually print it out and make a nice poster for your planetarium if you wanted, or your room, or things like that. Did I hear the 2-minute warning?
Yes.
Good. Oh, great. Thank you. So the summer was very successful. So we decided that we wanted to continue this in fall. And in our fall semesters typically have classes around between 180 to about 220 students. This fall, we had about 200 enrolled in the astronomy class or labs. So we decided to set up a separate club for that, which is easier to keep track of the students. And so the lab instructors, who typically are grad students, would be able to do so. We also trained the grad students over the summer. I trained a couple grad students who were conducting the main labs, so that they can run these, so that I didn't have to do multiple star parties every week, because that can get a bit much in addition to planetarium duties and things like that. Plus, it's easier for them to keep track of the posted observations. With the undergraduate astronomy labs, I would conduct a lab and a grad student would be there basically setting up questions in the chat session to make sure that students were interacting, instructing them to take images of some of the stuff they were seeing, and asking them questions about what topics we were looking at. So our next steps in the future plans, we just received a mini grant by a local foundation here to fund up to 10 classes of either middle or high school classes. So I'm in the process of putting together a little announcement about that. And what we're hoping to do is to get students involved SLU has a whole education piece embedded, and they do a number of things with middle and high school students. So we're going to try and set up that, and if that goes well, the foundation has said that they would like to continue that going forward. We're going to continue our weekly stargazing events, but change up the speakers. I have convinced some of my grad students that in the near future, I'm going to have them give some of them, so it's not always me. We also have a planetarium, a portable planetarium that is just a bit south of me here, John Meter. Some of you might know him from Maps. And I've talked with him about potentially also being a guest presenter for us on occasion, because he's interested in doing that too. And that'll be a fun way for us to collaborate. And then we're hoping to utilize this post-pandemic. Maine is a great place for observing, and in fact, we just had Katahdin Woods and Water be designated as a dark sky preserve, one of 12 internationally around the world. But we do have a lot of cloudy nights. So the hope is that even when we can open the Clark telescope back up, that we'll be able to utilize this, for our Friday night observing when the weather doesn't cooperate, and minimally continue to do a once a month online once we reopen the observatory, if we were in a lucky situation of having, all the Fridays be clear for public observing. We're also thinking it'll be good for the astronomy classes going forward too, again, because often they, if they didn't have enough observing sessions, their observing project had to be canceled. This way it won't have to be, because we almost always have the telescopes online. And that's it.
Okay, great. I was hating to interrupt you because it sounded like you're wrapping up, but you are out of time, and there are several questions. This is technically the end, but if people want to stick around and answer questions, I'm okay with staying for a little bit and helping you out with that. Jim Schweitzer had a lot of questions in the chat, and I'm not completely sure if you answered them all in your speech, but he wanted to know about missions. Missions are pre-scheduled. What does that mean? Do you schedule the objects? What if you want to observe an asteroid and take a time exposure?
Okay, so missions, basically the interface in SLU allows you to set up what you want to observe in advance. So for instance, for our Star Party Friday night, which we're actually doing this for a homecoming event for the university, so it's going to be open to, we have several hundred people signed up right now for that. We pre-schedule. So I will go in several days in advance. You can schedule things up to 6 days in advance. So I'll go in, look at the time slots for when my observing session is going to be scheduled and say, okay, I want to look at M13. I want to look at Mars. I want to look at, whichever objects. With the advanced levels, like the apprentice level and the astronomer level, you can conduct missions by celestial coordinates. So if you wanted to do something like, in fact, SLU has done a number of citizen science things where they've actually discovered asteroids and done timings and things like that. So it can be used to do that. There's a number of things with the advanced levels that you can do, including, like I mentioned, FITS files, if you want to do image processing and collect more data, and controlling some of the filters at the higher levels, the higher membership level fees.
Like, he did want to also see a picture you got of Mars and how many people typically attend their star parties.
Gotcha. So I'll see if I can find one. Let me see here. Well, that'll take a little bit of time. So Jim, maybe I'll send you one. But in my PowerPoint, you did see a couple of pictures of like Saturn and Jupiter, but I can get you one of Mars as well. The other question, how many people attend? So our club, we have about 70 members. Of course, 35 of those initially were from the astronomy class, or 30 or so were. But typically, I would say we have around 20 or so attendees on most Friday nights. However, we are being broadcast out to the broader SLU community, so we also get folks from outside of our club. So we've had people from Brazil, and we've had people from the UK attend our star parties as well, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of neat as well.
And Chuck Buter had a question. Can you clarify the blocking out of viewing time? Do you reserve the Friday time slot and images are coming in live, or are your images pre-captured?
No, the images are coming in live when the telescopes are there. And basically, you will set up what they call missions. So missions typically are 5-minute period of time. Each 5 minutes for most. There are some missions that are 10. But you basically say, I'm going to observe M13, let's say, for instance, from 8:30 to 8:35. And then the telescope will be on that, a particular telescope that you scheduled will be on that object for 5 minutes. And you'll see the image as it starts. And then by the end of the images, typically at the end of the mission is when the image is at its best. And you can really tell with planets in particular how good the seeing is, things like that. So it really is as close to simulating what it would be like looking through an eyepiece in my mind as possible, because people do see it's a live image from those telescopes. Some nights, if the telescopes are clouded out, it's great to have 2 sites. I've only had one session, which was for the astronomy lab, where both telescopes are clouded out in all the months I've had it. But you do have to have a backup plan. And then I usually go to the photo hub, because you have a photo hub where all your images are. And then that's the only time I've had to use pre-recorded images. But normally it's all live.
That appears to be all the questions as I'm skimming through back again. A lot of people are very appreciative of your presentation. I am very appreciative of your presentation. So thank you very much for presenting today.
And if anyone wants more information or wants to learn more about the IPS partnership, I'm more than happy to talk with folks about this offline too. So feel free to email me, either planetarium@maine.edu or sean.lotch@maine.edu.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending today. That is the end of GLPA Thursday, GLPA 2020 on Thursday. So I think we can just all hang out for a little bit. I'm not going to be able to hang out for too long. It's nap time, so I need to go take care of the kid. So I have a kid. But thank you so much for everyone coming here today. I miss being in person, and I miss seeing people in person. I miss seeing other adults. So, hopefully next year will be better. And tomorrow is our last day. We start at, where is it? Start at 2 p.m. Eastern. So we have the business meeting tomorrow, so please make sure you come to our business meeting. And especially since we don't have to drive back from anywhere, we can just sit in front of our TV or computer or whatever and attend the business meeting. So make sure you attend the business meeting. And I'm not hosting tomorrow, so good for you. So I think that's it. I'm gonna just go ahead and unmute everybody. Let me see if I can do that without looking silly.